to ill health. Chief among his achievements in St. Catherine, West Central, Mr. Speaker, were the annual back-to-school medicals. And a lot of persons in the constituency, Mr. Speaker. We had a few events last night representing the 9th night of his passing. And just listening to the citizens, the residents, the constituents who have had to deal with Dr. Baugh, he is most fondly remembered for being always available as a medical practitioner, day, night, anytime at all, to provide support for his constituents in the medical field, whether they could afford it or not. In fact, most of the times, totally free. And he is fondly remembered for that. Indeed, unlike myself, who have to hire doctors to run the back-to-school health fairs, Dr. Baugh would do it himself. And he would go on until odd hours of the night in order to ensure that all were seen, Mr. Speaker. He also is remembered fondly for his revolving loan scheme through the PC Bank for farmers in the community. That rural constituency, or that constituency, has significant rural features, and he was so concerned about the subsistence farming, primary farming activity in those areas, and the challenge of financing, that he arranged a revolving loan scheme to help farmers to finance and to do so in a way that was sustainable. And many speak of that today. He also brought, Mr. Speaker, electricity through the rural electrification program to many communities that previously had none. And very significantly, in terms of infrastructure, I'd like to record here his championing of the major water scheme, potable water scheme, through piped infrastructure in the Kitson town and its environs. And many remember him fondly for that, because prior to that initiative, those persons did not have potable water or piped water. While he was carrying out his duty as Member of Parliament, he was also to many, Mr. Speaker, a councillor and a friend. He is best described by his constituents as friendly, accommodating, and very importantly, Mr. Speaker, no matter what the political divide, he saw all citizens in the constituency as members of the community, and he would not hesitate to deal with all on an equal basis, and he's fondly remembered for that. And that's the way we should operate. Mr. Speaker, he was a genuine listener. The constituents have testimonies of them sitting with him, explaining issues, personal issues, community issues, and he was always available and willing to listen. He also had a very calming personality. Mr. Speaker, for us here who have clearly succeeded in constituency representation, been elected and have to serve, we will understand that sometimes, given our current system, there is a role for us in almost all disciplines, and you learn very fast, including mediation, solving problems. And he had that very calming effect on persons and in dealing with situations which quickly neutralized even the most angered around any particular dispute, and he's well known for that. Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has indeed lost a patriot, and he'll be remembered for a long time, and I'd like to say, on behalf of the medical fraternity, particularly in the public service, the public space, as well as the constituents within the constituency of St. Catherine West Central, I would like to, on their behalf, express our deepest condolences to his family, to his wife, Vilma, to his 2 sons and daughter, to the extended family, and indeed to his political family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, as important as this matter is, and it's going to take a little time, I'm going to ask permission just to recognize a number of Jamaican Canadian members from the Jamaican Canadian Association who are visiting with us, and they will have to leave in a few minutes. So I'm going to ask you to welcome them. Thank you. Mr. Daly.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too would like to pay a special tribute to both Dr. Baugh, former MP Mr. Shaw, and former MP Mr. Laurie Broderick, who has been my very good friend. First, let me extend my condolence to the family of Dr. Baugh, and to say to them that we will hold them up in our prayers as they go through this very, very difficult period of loss. Dr. Baugh has been a quiet giant. In fact, I've never heard him speak loud. What I recall most of Dr. Baugh was when I became Minister of Health in April 2006. To be very frank with you, and some of my close colleagues here have heard me tell the story, I couldn't even pronounce the word epidemiology. I did pronounce it right a while ago. And I remember coming here on my first day after I was named the Minister of Health. We were on that side. And he sat and waited me out and pulled me to the corner, and we sat down. And he gave me about an hour after all the members left an overview of the Ministry of Health. And we kept in touch all along my tenure as Minister of Health from 2006 to September 2007. When I became Minister of Health again, he was ailing. I kept in touch with him through his wife and always inquire about his health. He was the chairman of the Jamaica Labour Party. When he spoke, the country would listen to what Dr. Baugh said. He became temporary leader of the opposition, if some of the younger ones will recall, after Prime Minister Golding resigned, and in between the period of installing Prime Minister Andrew Holness, Minister Baugh at the time became the leader of the opposition. Acting, no, you can't act as leader. He was the leader of the opposition. Or whatever. They were in government. Yeah. No, they were not in government. The leader of the opposition. He has made a tremendous contribution as a skilled surgeon, a committed medical doctor, and someone who people who have had to relate to him will tell you he never turned back anyone. Unlike most medical doctors who are politicians, and most medical doctors just give their service free. There are some in the house who do it every day. Dr. Baugh did it all of his life while he was able to practice. I hope that some of us will adopt some of the principles of Dr. Baugh. The quiet giant, firm in his conviction as a laborite, but has never ever offended anyone from the other side. Has always maintained friendships with everyone. May his soul rest in peace and perpetual light shine upon him. We await the announcement for arrangements for his funeral, so we all can attend to show our respect. Mr. Speaker, I also like to pay tribute to Mr. Shaw, friend, comrade and my neighboring member of parliament across the river in southwest St. Anne, that the member later on Besa Walford represented. We operated as one because in that stretch of community we helped to train the workers on the other side, and we had joint meetings. It was a powerful community man. They call him Power Saw, because on every campaign trail you would have this Power Saw that he starts. It was the feature of his campaign. People loved him until he finally decided to leave the political arena. He continued his business, he continued his building construction work. He has built many, people didn't know that side of Power Saw. He was a very good builder of homes and plazas. Anything you want him to build, he would build. We miss him, and we hope that he will also find eternal rest. I want to pay a very special tribute to someone who he and I became very, very good friends, even though he's the only man to have beaten me in politics. Lawrence Broderick, a Clarendon man and a true Jamaican who loved people and worked for people. Has his own style, little brash, someone who can turn you off if you don't understand him. But deep inside of Laura Broderick was this love for people and for Jamaica. People don't know the many achievements Laura Broderick had in film, in development, in real estate, etc., etc. He was the first one to have challenged me and stayed. And we would meet regularly during each campaign. We would also plan where I will be tonight and where he will be. And if there was a problem, we would meet afterwards. We'd find some place to meet. I'm saying this because it's something that the young political leaders who are coming up now must understand, that in the battle for winning a constituency, you don't have to be enemies. You can have a relationship and a friendship because you're both offering yourselves to the people of Jamaica. And it's the best campaign. Those persons who the people feel will do a better job, they will vote for that person. After he lost in 2002, he and I had lunch as chasers. And I said to him, Larry, I don't think you have the stamina to remain. And he did remain and beat me. And after I lost, we met again on several occasions. And one day he said to me, no, not only as chasers, but he said to me one day, you know why I stayed? Horace, those words kept ringing in my ears when you said I don't have the stamina. So I had to find the stamina to remain. We ran against each other again in 2011. He won me by 226 votes in 2002. In 2007, came back and I beat him by 1,775 in 2011. By 2016, he was on my political platform as part of my team. Really? He became my comrade. And it doesn't matter how you started out. The friendship developed into comradeship. And until the time of his incapacitation, we remain friends. There's a member of this House, the Minister of Mining, who knows the closeness between Laura Broderick and myself, because they're also very close. And on many occasions when I can't find him, the member would find someone who is connected to Laurie so that I could get a chance to speak with him. He has lost his brother, he lost his sister, and now we have lost a patriot, lost his son too, yes, thank you, just remember. A patriot, a true Jamaican, a man who loved people. The constituency of Northern Clarendon JLP supporters and PNP supporters, when they heard of his death, mourn his death. And we will be having an appropriate activity in the constituency to celebrate the life of Larry Broderick, a true Jamaican and a true Clarendonian. May his soul rest in peace, and may perpetual light shine upon all of them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Montague.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I too would wish to join my colleagues in paying tribute to the stalwarts who have served this House. The 3 former members served well in this House and served their constituencies even better. But, Mr. Speaker, I must say a special word for Dr. Baugh, who served the House from the 2 sides of the island, from the west and from the east. He also served as the chairman of a national organization. And as his tenure as chairman of the Jamaica Labour Party, it was marked by his calmness, yet firmness, and how he was able to bring contending sides together without damage to the organization. He was able to settle a lot of disputes in a calm, reasonable fashion that only a Dr. Baugh could do. His work within the health sector is legendary, and others can speak better to that than I. But within the organization of the Labour Party that he served as General Secretary and as Chairman, he will be greatly missed. Whether you were from Westmoreland or St. Thomas, Clarendon or St. Anne, Dr. Baugh's quiet, effective handling of situations is always respected. Dr. Baugh was very respectful of different persons, and no matter your class in society, he treated you with respect. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica is the worst off with the loss of our Ken Baugh. We therefore say to his family, in this time of bereavement, to hold strong to the power that is above all of us, because he will take us through. Because a tribute to Dr. Baugh has to entail a tribute to his family, especially his dear wife, Velma. Mr. Speaker, the member from Southwest St. Anne, the former member, Mr. Shaw, a well-known businessman, contractor, builder, developer. I've had a couple run-ins with the gentleman over the years, and I've found him to be a solid Jamaican who was respectful of others and who wanted to see his country developed, especially rural Jamaica. And Mr. Speaker, with regards to the former member from North Clarendon, Mr. Larry Broderick, former army man, attorney at law, and movie producer. A lot of persons didn't know Larry was involved in the movie production business. As a matter of fact, in one of the companies that I have interest, we had a partnership in a business venture up in North Clarendon, and that business venture, I must inform, is threatened. The viability is threatened because of the activities of the Member of Parliament for North Clarendon. Indeed. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is my wish and hope for the families of all 3 members that the God that created us will comfort them, and that the son that was sacrificed will stand with them, and that the Holy Spirit that he promised to accompany us will never leave them during this time of bereavement. May their souls rest in peace.
Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to join my colleagues in expressing sympathies and condolences to our former colleagues who have left us since we last met. And I'll start with Dr. Baugh. I could just say ditto to all the remarks made about that gentleman. I remember at the funeral services for Dwight Nelson, I saw him for the first time in a long time, and it was such a delight to be in his presence once again. Like others have said, Dr. Baugh was really a gentleman. I have met many residents in St. Catherine who he has been patient, who has been his patient. And they're all many of those are PNP supporters. And they have remarked how, one, a fine doctor he was, and the gentleman he was. And he even went, as Member Daly indicated, they are unable to pay. It never affected their ability to obtain his services. I have the utmost regard and respect for that gentleman, for who he was. And I am proud and happy to have had the opportunity to serve with him. Power Saw, Glenville Shaw. As the member from North Clarendon has indicated, that he was a member of Parliament that was truly committed to the people of his constituency. I had the opportunity to tour his constituency with him going into the 2002 election. At the time I was Minister of State in the Ministry of Education. I spent an entire day with him through the hills and valleys of Southwest St. Anne. And what was very clear was how the people respected him, loved him, and the connection that he had with the people in his constituency. When he lost that election that followed, it never deterred him from continuing to serve the people of that constituency. I think we have lost a true Jamaican servant, a true man of the people. And I wish for his families, for his family, all the best in their period of bereavement. Former Member of Parliament, Laurie Broderick, I've had the opportunity to have had many conversations with him. And if you don't really get the chance to talk with Laurie, you don't really get to know the depth of the person. A caring person, a reasonable person, and one who is who was really committed to the people of Jamaica. Very well, I know the more calm and demeanor of Laurie, and somebody who had come to develop a good friendship with and respect. I also want to join others in extending sympathies to his family and close friends. May their soul rest in peace and light shine perpetually on them.
Dr. Ferguson.
Much obliged. I'd like to add my words to the tributes to 3 parliamentarians who have recently departed this life. Dr. Baugh was in fact a character who we would all do well to emulate, in that he was a true patriot and committed to service and given to his own genteel way of conduct. I really want to point to a particular feature of my experience with him, because some years ago, having become Minister of Health myself and faced with a dengue outbreak at the time, Ken Baugh, while being opposition spokesman on health and making public comments, was nevertheless always open to giving private advice and exchanging views privately about the best way to confront this particular challenge. And I think that that conduct was a measure of the highest possibilities that exist for our parliament and for parliamentarians. The ability to compete and yet at the same time to cooperate in the best interests of the country as each perceived it. I think his reputation for decency and goodwill earned him the respect of all his colleagues within the House on all sides. And certainly we would like to add our words of tribute and to say, especially in the face of his long period of illness, that this House should convey the unanimously held condolences to his widow and the other members of his family. Interestingly, both the Baugh family, and in this instance I'm going to mention the Broderick family, have members who spanned both sides of the political divide in the country. And maybe because of that, they proved to be the particular individuals who they were. The Broderick family, Laurie Broderick, member of a family who started out, the father, representing the People's National Party, Percy, representing the Jamaica Labour Party, and Laurie representing both at various points in time. No, he did. And it is a measure of the man that he gave his life ultimately in service to the people of Clarendon in what he thought was the best way at each particular point in time. And tribute should be paid to him. He was an attorney at law, he served in the army, but his life was fundamentally one of public service. He defeated the current member for Northern Clarendon by a couple hundred votes, was defeated by a margin which defies measurement, but ended up as a part of the campaign team for Horace Daly, but was always throughout it a devoted, patriotic, and dedicated servant, loyal to his community and his country. Again, I want to applaud his deep social consciousness and his advocacy on behalf of the people, and ask also that the House convey in the usual manner our condolences to the family. Glenville Shaw was Power Saw, as we called him, and as he was known, was a unique political figure. For one thing, he ended a dynasty, political dynasty in Southwest St. Anne. Yeah, he ended a political dynasty. But he was also unique, not only because of his devotion to Southwest St. Anne and the people, but he was one of those Jamaicans who was really what you would call a transnational Jamaican. He brought his diaspora associations out of the United Kingdom mainly with him into local politics. And it says something about our country really, and the kind of way our country has evolved. Because there are many families, if we go through some of our constituencies, who are literally transnational citizens. They live 6 months here and 6 months there, and it is perhaps of some striking symbolism that he actually passed in the UK, but his heart was always in Southwest St. Anne. And he was a visionary of no mean order, because he really had a vision of Jamaican agriculture being the mainstay of his constituency. But he had a vision of Jamaican agriculture which went beyond just farming and selling the goods. His ultimate vision was for the development of a pharmaceutical industry based upon the Jamaican products. And he did, along with, again, some of his colleagues from overseas, do a lot of work towards patenting some of these remedies that they had developed. And I would hope that as we pay tribute to his passing, we dedicate ourselves collectively to seeing that vision of a new Jamaican rural economy come to fruition. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to make these few remarks on behalf of our departing colleagues.
Dr. Ferguson.
Mr. Speaker, I too want to pay tribute to our former colleagues. The fact is, Honorable Dr. Kenneth Ball, our friend Horace, Laurie Broderick, and to their constituents, persons whom they have served over these many years. But Mr. Speaker and colleagues, good men must die, but death cannot kill their names. And therefore, as we celebrate Dr. Kenneth Ball, I remember him very well. As a young politician entering this House, I would have known about Dr. Ball. I would have seen him engage in the political process. And he's one of those politicians that I have admired, I have watched keenly over these many years. I believe that outside of his excellence as a consultant surgeon, outside of the fact about his quiet disposition, I believe that whether it was politics or as a citizen of Jamaica, Dr. Ken Ball represented the best of Jamaica. And one of the reasons I oftentimes want to speak on these occasions, it is because of what we ourselves as politicians have done to this noble profession. Our people see us as corrupt, without integrity oftentimes, and many would say the worst things about us. But I believe, Mr. Speaker, many of us, even as colleagues, have not taken time out to know each other. We say the best things about our colleagues when they are dead. The best things. And the truth is that there are those of us who enter this parliament at the top of our games. We come from varied backgrounds. We have done things that others have never done before. But once you enter this chamber, you are seen as just enemies, and we say the worst things about each other. And then we are surprised about what the population says about us. I believe, Mr. Speaker, if you ask Ken Bauer's constituents, if you ask his patients, and I've taken the time out over the years to find out these things. If you ask just friends, the fact is that he's the kind of person, the kind of leader that you'd want to emulate relative to his example. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I believe as we celebrate their lives today, and I know many will have the opportunity at the funeral service, but I believe that for all of us, these moments are moments for reflection in the kind of politics we practice, and it is something that must come to an end. I don't believe that people can make the kind of sacrifices we make. You get calls every hour of the day and night. People come into your homes or your place of work. You give away most of what you have. You come to politics reasonably comfortable. And all of us who have been ministers can testify about the help we have had to give to our former colleagues. They get sick. There's no proper health insurance. Number of things that impact us. And because of how we serve, we are afraid to take some of the decisions that are necessary. And as a result of that, in our last days, even before death, we become members of the welfare state. I am happy to have known Ken Bauer, Lawrence Broderick, and Powersaw. And today we pay tribute to men who have given great sacrifice to their country and great sacrifice to their families. Many of us know that weekends are the best days for family, and it is also the best days for politics. But we give them up. And at the same time, we take all the battering without doing anything to protect ourselves. I want to just close by saying, may their souls rest in peace and light perpetually shine on them.
Mr. Speaker,
and then Dr. Chang.
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to join the several colleagues before me who spoke about the qualities of the three persons with whom I have had an opportunity to serve over this period, and I've known them more or less, some better than others, but I've had the opportunity to not only interact with them, but to
come to know them a little bit. I want to say to the families of all three of our former colleagues that they should take heart in the work that they have done, in the sacrifices that they have made, and that we here in the Parliament who have been through what they have gone through stand with them in this very difficult period of mourning. I want to just say a few words about Dr. Ken Baugh, though. Others have spoken about his qualities as a medical doctor and the contribution that he has made in that arena. I would just like to say a few words about the contribution Dr. Baugh has made as a diplomat, as a foreign minister, and someone who, as chief diplomat for the Jamaican Foreign Service, has made a significant contribution in that arena as well. And I have, as someone who served in that arena and having connections, I have heard good things said about Dr. Baugh throughout not only the CARICOM but further afield. I today, though, just want to recall a particular event when, as opposition spokesman on foreign affairs and foreign trade at that time, I brought to this House a resolution on Cuba. And at the time there was some controversy about it. Some members on that side having concerns and issues with the resolution. And Dr. Baugh, who was by then the foreign minister, after the debate started and it was clear that there would have been some points of opposition to the resolution, Dr. Baugh and myself sat together and worked through the resolution, making some minor adjustments, but he offered a solution to what all of us knew was the correct thing to do, but it was taking on a partisan flavor. We met, he offered a solution, and today that particular resolution comes annually, debated, passed, because there's a common policy and a common strategy on Cuba. And I thanked him then for his contribution, and I want to thank him now, his memory, to say that the kind of person he is, the diplomat, the conciliator, someone who could reason through difficult issues, made his contribution, and today it is a staple and one of the highlights in our foreign policy framework, that Cuba, on both sides of this House, is a common policy towards Cuba, and I want to congratulate him and thank him for his contribution. May his soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine on him.
Dr. Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to pay tribute to those who have sat in this House and served. First, let me, Dr. Kenneth Leonil Baugh, was my professional colleague, political partner, but also most of family. Indeed, I was legal my brother-in-law. He was the big brother in Jamaica, the same Jamaica I never had. And he was the big brother I never had, and had the privilege of working with him closely for these many years. A gentleman and a good father and a great advisor. Many have spoken of his many qualities. I met him early when he was still a senior resident at the University Hospital, and then a role model for medical students. Of course, at that time, I was still a medical student, and I happened to be dating his sister.
On most occasions, it was not so much medicine that meet him, and Dr. Ball had that gentle half smile which would look at me and say, Horace, I want to remind you you're dating my youngest sister. With a very firm and deliberate tone. He later departed to the United Kingdom, where he was completing his surgical training. By the time he came back in the late 70s, I was now married and graduated as well and working. And I have at the time, like many Jamaicans, we had gotten involved in the political arena. The 70s was, of course, a time of ferment and the fact of life. And indeed, I had a good time. Every Jamaican took an interest in public life and was on one side or the other. Some of it became too tense, but all Jamaicans were trained that decided that they had an interest in their country and would play a role. I had long discussions with Dr. Ball, who had very little exposure to politics. And though the younger one had gotten involved in university politics, political at that time, active in Young Jamaica and other years of public political life. But I remember when I got him involved very vividly, Dr. Ball had come back from England and he said he had met on what you'd call institutional racism in England. And he said very sharply and distinctly, I will never migrate. It was like a final commitment. He'd never migrate. And he'd do whatever it is to help the people of his country and to make Jamaica a better place. He wasn't condemning anyone, but his commitment was to get involved in public service and do what he can to help this country a better place. And indeed, I think his contribution has made this country a better place and contributed to the development in this country over time. At the time, he had in fact distinguished himself now as the senior surgeon, senior medical officer at Corner Regional, very successful professional and deeply involved in the medical field in providing leadership in the professional field. But he had also won the hearts of the people of Montague Bay, where he had served as a physician. And when invited to participate in political life as a candidate for the Jamaica Labour Party, accepted. Still, I said, totally underexposed, and in many ways, Dr. Ball not only retained his gentle spirit in politics, but in some sense, while serving as General Secretary and Chairman and Minister of Government, he retained much aspects of what you might call that innocence that characterized him throughout his life in the political arena, as he had when he entered the political game. He left a very lucrative practice, and indeed, the sacrifice was indeed great for him as one coming from the West. And in many ways, he had wondered why he stayed the course. He actually won the seat, quite like many of us who contested the 1980 election on behalf of the Labour Party. But it was significant, I think, that he took a seat that was traditionally very strong for the People's National Party. Well, while Dr. Ball departed after the very short three years, it is fair to say Montague Bay has never been the same again from his service, because much of what those of us who came after inherited was from the impact of a Ken Ball serving in his own quiet way in Montague Bay. He exited too, of course, because of the challenges faced as a member of Parliament coming from Montague Bay. References made to sacrifice. At that time, I suspect the returns to his as a professional was not the MP salary and the minister's salary did not amount to much more than one surgical case at any point in time in that week. But he moved to Kingston, where he thought it would have been easier to work in a constituency where he was near and could get to on a real-time basis. In fact, I think on one occasion, on the many occasions, he would drive from Kingston, and he drove himself, even though he had a driver. Right, as a minister, he would drive down and leave Kingston in the late hours. And when he decided to move to more than one occasion, he actually fell asleep and ran off the road in Falmouth. into the swamp period. There was no major accident, but he would find himself going off the road, and he decided that if the party leadership required of him, he would continue to serve, but he moved to an area where it was logistically easier, and he continued to serve in the Ministry of Health. But that reflected his sincere and real commitment. He was prepared to work. He worked with dignity, with competence, and gave his time for the people of his country. His sincerity was known to all, and he worked with everyone in the same manner, as is indicated by some who spoke from that side. There was no animosity. He disagreed. And while he was a gentle and easygoing person, he had a stiff back. When he made up his mind, you're not going to bend Dr. Ball. But he didn't do so in a contentious manner, argumentative. He would listen, he would reason, whether within the party or across the aisles. But when he's finished, he would look at what was said, give his reason, this is my decision. And like a surgeon, that was the final diagnosis. He would operate without change. That was the gentleman I grew to know well, both as a colleague, and a family member, and a professional. He was deeply committed to his family, his 3 kids, Gregory, Warren, and Melanie. In fact, I think much of his commitment to working in the interest of this country revolved around his children's experience in London. Because while he was the young surgeon at a leading hospital, he would be treated as such because he was coming to the mother country to learn to be an accomplished surgeon, learn the skills of medicine, and be sent back. And therefore would be exposed to individuals who would treat him with the respect that he has due to the physician. His family didn't have that privilege. They were in school and attending school like any other black English student. And therefore they had the unfortunate experience of having to deal with the institutional prejudice and biases of that country. And that gave Dr. Ball this deep commitment to work to make his country, I said, a better place for all. He may have done so, and he did so, with the commitment to one of the political parties, the Jamaica Labour Party. But his respect transcended political partisanship. And at all times, he did so with sincerity. Dr. Ball served, of course, in the Jamaica Labour Party as indicated, as General Secretary and Chairman, but in more ways as a role model, just as he did in health, for those who were younger. As although I recruited him and had longer years, I still had to look with respect to his, and how he managed himself, how he conducted himself. I had the privilege of working with him in the Ministry of Health as his parliamentary secretary. And the time up to was the current House leader was the Minister of State, and working across the health services, and went through some challenging times. Dr. Ball would have known for his contribution to expanding and building on a powerful public health service which started in the previous administration. There are a number of things, but also was one of the most difficult fiscal time in the history of Jamaica. And we had to take some very difficult decisions, but he carried them, let's say, with a certain dignity. We were able to ride them through. When you had 1983, 84, many will recall, we went through a period when we had to cut the public service by nearly 10,000 workers, and that involved a number of health workers. Hospitals were scaled and reorganized. Part of that, of course, in terms of the physical infrastructure in the hospitals, was not as traumatic to go through as dealing with the public health workers, many of whom we had in fact assisted in recruiting, because the plan was to in fact expand the A hospitals to be able to provide quality service to everyone. But of course the expansion did not follow through to the plan. Some followed through, the development of Corner Regional, Mandeville, and the expansion at Victoria, Jubilee, and KPH. And the idea was to feed into these so that all patients across Jamaica could get modern accessibility, because the kind of facilities you can put in these big hospitals are not available in small hospitals. And that was the intention. It didn't quite work that way, but I think it was remarkable that we were able to go through that period successfully, and a lot of it had to do with the leadership of Dr. Ball without too much disruption in the total service given in health. Because of the deep respect they had for him, as well as his own sincerity that he pervaded in getting through a difficult period. I could say much more of the gentleman, a gentle giant, a sincere public servant, one remembered who gave of himself to the people of this country. He made the sacrifices oftentimes not recognized by those many who look on to those in public service. And therefore, I said, a privilege for me to have served with him, to have worked with him, to have shared in his life and the life of his family. Today we extend to his family, Vilma, his 3 children, his grandchildren, and all the wider family that was close to him as he went through some very difficult time this last year after he was diagnosed with the illness that took him, and he was at some time disabled. We want to thank them for the role they played in his life, thank them for give further thanks to Dr. Ball for the role he played in this country's political and public life, for the life he left that we can look on and model across the aisles as a man who gave with integrity, commitment, and sincerity to the people of this country. May his soul rest in peace and life perpetual shine. And may his family find strength in the legacy of a wonderful gentleman that they had, and a father and husband. I must pay a few short words to all the 2 members who served in this house. They were public servants who gave of their time to the country. Laura Broderick, who I met while in the house. I knew the Broderick family is an outstanding family in public life in Jamaica. I think their father served in the federal parliament. Percy Broderick was a long-standing active member of this party. He was general secretary at one stage, and I think he made chairman as well, and served the people of Clarendon outstanding. His brother Larry came on and followed in the footsteps of his family, served in North Clarendon, and again wanted to realize a successful lawyer, and that was disrupted going into public life. I don't think he recovered after from that aspect of it, but I knew him as a good friend, good man who gave of his time to the people of the country and to the constituents. I didn't know Glenville Shaw, but I would pay tribute to him, thank his fine time in this parliament. I think everyone who gives up of their time and decides to serve the people of this country in the political arena, with all the challenges and difficulties, we should remember them, pay tribute to them, and give thanks for their service. To all of them, may life perpetual shine on them, and may their soul rest in peace. But to my friend and brother, Dr. Ball, walk good. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, much has been said. In tribute to the passing of 3 former parliamentarians. And I don't intend to repeat what has already been said, only to emphasize those salient points. Mr. Speaker, Glenville Shaw came into this house and joined our fraternity of elected representatives in the same time that I did, in 1997. What I recall of Powassaw, Glenville Shaw, was that he was a quiet man. That may not be so in his constituency, but certainly it would have been the case in the House. And it may not be any fault of his. The truth is that at that point in time, Mr. Speaker, there were 8 of us on that side, and all the seats here were occupied. And poor Powassaw was right in the corner. And a member of the backbench at the time. Of course, he made great use of the constituency debates that would happen at that time. Then it was the sectoral debates, and the constituency debates were a part of it. And he, I recall, was a strong advocate for his constituency. The other thing I would say about him, Mr. Speaker, is that he challenged one of the icons of national politics, Dr. Gallimore, in that seat, and lost by 3 votes, probably one of the thinnest margins, in 1993. He didn't leave, he stuck with it, and he proved his point in 1997, but unfortunately could not prove it again in 2002. I wish to, unfortunately for us, Mr. Speaker, Laurie Broderick. Laurie was an army man first and foremost. Then he became an attorney at law, and he dabbled in various business enterprises, including being a movie producer. Not many Jamaicans would know that he produced a movie titled Clash. It was a movie about dancehall culture. It was not a box office success, but it did make its way to cable TV. And I'm certain that if you were to Google it, you will see that it had its fair share of viewings. It was not, as I said, a profitable enterprise, but he believed so much in the culture that he put together a conglomerate of Jamaican investors and financed the movie. He became a member of Parliament in 1997. Forgive me, 2007. And you would very well recall that member from North Clarendon. Painful recollection. And he was appointed Minister of State in the Ministry of Mining and Energy. Mr. Speaker, we had a fairly good relationship, and the piece of advice I will always remember him giving is that in times of crisis, the decision falls to the senior man in the room. And that, he said, he got from his training at Sandhurst as an army man. And of course, there were times of crisis. And when he spoke, he would always refer to that when we have the tough decisions to make in crisis, leave it to the man with the greatest experience, the senior man in the room. We pay tribute to Laurie Broderick. Mr. Speaker, I got to know Ken Baugh when I was just about to leave high school, because he established his medical practice in Spanish Town, where I grew up, and he became my doctor then. I went to him for my checkups and medicals to go back to school. And I tried to engage him in political conversations at the time. But obviously, he had put politics down for a while and was deciding to focus on his medical profession and practice and growing his practice. When I came to Kingston after university, he continued to be my doctor, and in fact, by then had a practice in Kingston. And I joked with him at that time to say, when you were in Spanish Town, you didn't have any interest, but now that you have come back to Kingston, you now have an interest. And he pointed out that he was encouraged by friends, and I suspect one of them would have been his good friend here, the now House leader, to come back into politics. And he decided to take up the seat West Central St. Catherine. He was not successful at that time in 1993. He was defeated by Alithia Barker. 93. 97. Yes, you're right, the 97. Right, right, because Alithia Barker would be in Parliament with us. Right. Enid Bennett was the MP in 1993. That, you're perfectly correct. So in 1997, he decided to go back, and he was not successful. But he stuck with it, and he became successful in 2002 to become the Member of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, that was entering into a difficult time for the Jamaica Labour Party. The then leader of the opposition, the Most Honourable Edward Seaga, was transitioning out of Parliament, and Bruce Golding was coming in. The question was, during the interregnum, who would be the leader of the opposition? And by consensus, all MPs at the time, including myself, agreed that we could entrust this position to Ken Ball. The media reports carry his own words, because a reporter interviewed him and asked him, so wouldn't you keep this position of leader of the opposition? And he said, no. And that is the mark of the man. He was not about power. He was about service. And that is, to me, the signal marker of his integrity. Of course, the history is well documented. Bruce Golding would, in a few months' time, go on to win West Kingston seat, and Ken Ball would resign, and Bruce would then become the leader of the opposition. Right throughout Ken's life, and reflected in the tributes that have been given here, is that in Jamaican terms, you would describe Ken as a nice man. As a nice man, a man of great honor, integrity, dignity, and agreeing with the leader of the opposition. He is a personality, a character that we all could do well to emulate. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, I have tried to emulate his life and work. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that Jamaica is the better off for having such a person representing us. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Leader of the Opposition, Minister of Health, Member of Parliament, great Jamaican. May light perpetually shine on these souls that served with us in this noble house, and may we extend to their family our sympathies and deepest respect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, I think it's the first time that I have heard 3 past members of the Parliament being remembered at once. And I, on behalf of the staff of Parliament and the security, we send condolence to the family and express our grief with them. I'm going to ask that we stand for 1 minute in remembrance of their soul. May their soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine on them. Thank you. Announcements.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there are other statements to be made today. I invite you to request that the Minister of Transport and Mining makes a statement to this Honorable House.
Minister Montague.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, honorable members of this House, I'm tasked to update you and the nation on the implementation of Phase 2 of the modernization and expansion of the alumina refinery in St. Elizabeth. As you are aware, this refinery, Alpart, is 100% owned and operated by Juscan Iron and Steel Group Company Limited, JISCO, which is beneficially and effectively owned by the Jiangsu province of the People's Republic of China. JISCO has indicated that this phase of Alpart's development is slated to commence within the next 50 days. Mr. Speaker, I wish to remind this House and the people of Jamaica that the modernization and expansion program will be one of the largest investments in the history of this country. Total investment is projected at $1.1 billion when fully completed. It should be understood that the proposed investment in the associated special economic zone, which is a part of Minister Henry's portfolio, is projected to be significantly more. Mr. Speaker, this House is aware that JISCO acquired Alpart from the United Company Russell, UC Russell, in 2016 for approximately US $299 million. By December 2017, the refinery had shipped its first cargo of alumina under JISCO's ownership. It is necessary to note that initial rehabilitation and upgrades over the years by JISCO are valued at approximately $300 million US. The refinery was built in 1968, and at the time it was acquired by JISCO has been mothballed since 2009. No other alumina plant has ever been closed for such a long period. Mr. Speaker, it is noteworthy that the plant, by virtue of its design, is very energy intensive. At the time it was built, oil was being sold at approximately $2 US per barrel. The refinery's energy use is therefore extremely high, and JISCO has identified scope for significant improvement in energy efficiency. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, Alpart had not been the best maintained refinery up to the point that it was sold to JISCO. In particular, the powerhouse had been poorly maintained. In fact, the control systems, which were outdated, have made it difficult to properly operate. Mr. Speaker, I have provided this overview of the history and physical condition of Alpart to allow members to understand that it required significant maintenance and upgrading. To enable it to operate efficiently and profitably, major overall modernization and expansion have become urgently necessary. The planned upgrade, Mr. Speaker, will result in a significantly more efficient refinery. Also, its production capacity will be increased from 1.6 million tons per year to 2 million tons per year. Mr. Speaker, one of the principal objectives of the pending modernization program is to markedly lower the refinery's production costs. This will increase its competitiveness, save jobs, reduce waste, and generate income for the government and people of Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, you would be aware that over the last 30 years, the government of Jamaica has implemented numerous initiatives to promote efficiency in our alumina industry as a tool to induce increased economic growth. These mechanisms are focused on incentivizing companies to improve efficiency of their alumina refineries. Methodologies have included changes to the taxation and wider fiscal regimes afforded to companies, partial or total waiving of the bauxite production levy for specific periods of time, and most recently, profit-sharing agreements. Mr. Speaker, the pending modernization and expansion works at GISCO will build on work that commenced once it was acquired by GISCO. The initial phase of the modernization program included the installation of some 10 megawatts of packaged power to augment the existing power plant, which has been a major source of the plant's problems. Significant civil works, including the pouring of foundations for various buildings and systems, and direct improvements to the power plant have been completed. As I speak, equipment and machinery needed for the expansion are either on-site, en route to Jamaica, or on order. Mr. Speaker, the technical team in the Ministry of Mining recommended several options to GISCO during the modernization discussion. However, after due consideration, the company decided that the best option at this time is to suspend alumina production and focus on a full-scale modernization and expansion program. This decision was arrived at after considering various factors, which include but not limited to worker safety and welfare, the regularity to which segments of the plants fail to properly function, and in cases stop functioning, puts the workers' safety at risk, and the company is also at risk. High cost of production and high levels of waste. To continue producing alumina at over $480 per ton was unviable. The prevailing low and falling price of alumina on the world market. Mr. Speaker, between 2016 and 2019, the price of alumina fell from approximately $500 per ton to just under $300 per ton now. Difficulties being faced in sourcing parts for the old equipment at the plant. The manufacturing of many of the parts and systems used by Alpart has been discontinued. Lest we forget, the plant is over 50 years old. Consequently, it has been difficult and time-consuming, and not to mention expensive, to acquire parts for much of the equipment within the refinery. Additionally, many of the parts obtained were cannibalized from closed refineries. Many of these second-hand replacement parts have therefore failed with a degree of rapidity that is financially unsustainable. Mr. Speaker, we must pay tribute at this stage to the unions operating at the plant, as we have met on more than one occasion, and under the auspices of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security have worked out a labour agreement to ensure industrial peace for the next 2 years. Mr. Speaker, discussions with the unions continue, and up to yesterday, there was a meeting with the unions and the GISCO in terms of having a small maintenance crew, as well as employing persons to help with the modernization. The Member of Parliament has also been briefed and will be having a meeting with the management of GISCO. And Mr. Speaker, I must also indicate that I had a briefing with the opposition spokesman on mining and his team to bring him up to speed with the situation at GISCO. Mr. Speaker, I also undertake now to continue to keep the House updated on the measures and activities at GISCO, just as we did during the tough period with the U.S. sanctions we're facing UC Rosal. We face it as a united body, as one country, as Jamaica, and we intend to treat with this matter on the same footing. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I acknowledge the Minister on the briefing that he provided to me and my team on this very important subject. I also want to say that we did also receive a briefing from the GISCO team. In fact, the leader of the opposition and myself had a full briefing, and we appreciate the situation as it is unfolding. Before I deal with GISCO in particular, I'd like to, Mr. Speaker, in responding, just try to see if we can contextualize what is happening in this industry, and perhaps without sounding alarmist, of other things to come. I am so happy that the Minister's approach is not to see this as an opportunity, but to recognize the inherent potential problem that we face, because the mining sector, as he has quite rightly pointed out, does contribute significantly to the economy, and we have seen that in relation to GISCO, just by virtue of that plant being re-established, albeit at a much lower capacity than its potential, we have seen growth in the economy relating particularly to that. And the Minister, in the consultation, again accepted and has pledged to implement this council that I have been proposing, and his colleague minister has now put in place for energy, and we're looking forward to our first meeting on Friday. But the mining council, I do believe, is most appropriate at this time, again, to be able to work to anticipate challenges, to enable the country to come to terms with mining. It continues to be a very thorny issue, but one that we have to continue to grapple with, because mining does contribute in a number of ways: employment, growth, etc., and etc., and etc. So we are confirming that this approach to all the stakeholders coming together to address the various issues that affect mining is so crucial. As we see the price of alumina declining, it reminds us of prior times when this industry goes into recession. Jamaica has been known to be a swing location, so that when the prices fall globally, our refineries, because they operate at lower efficiency levels, they are the first to close. And it was one of our aims as an administration to get our refineries far more efficient, and we have been able to succeed in one regard in relation to Jamaica, where we are anticipating very shortly their full introduction of LNG as energy source. But we are still not there as yet with Windalco, Yuatan, and in that regard, I need to ask the Minister, just for the country to be aware, in light of the fall in prices and what I know to be the cost of production, say at Windalco, do you anticipate any fallout at this time, and what are the proactive steps that you intend to take to prevent such a fallout? So in relation to GISCO, I think we fully understand the difficulty that GISCO has faced and is facing. I will still pay tribute to GISCO for their bravery in taking over this facility, which was actively encouraged and supported by me and certainly by you. Bravery because it was locked down for quite a while, and they understood the magnitude of reopening a plant that was closed for so long, but they took it on, and we have to recognize that. I think we're also convinced of their sincerity to do the necessary retrofitting and expansion at this time. But there's a matter that I want to raise with you, Minister, because for me it appears as if they are not yet at the point of starting the refurbishing, because we were told that there were to be further studies, feasibilities, to determine exactly how they're going to scope the plant. Even though they are clear on the energy source and system, they still weren't too clear whether or not they were going to establish their own energy facility or to purchase from others. So I believe that there was some more work to be done in terms of planning for this refurbishing, and probably you could explain to us whether or not it is as imminent as you've made it out to be. One of the difficulties that we face when these plants close is that the surrounding towns around them all suffer tremendously. And I would like to suggest, as part of the proactivity, to see what interventions the state can do in relation to places that surround and have seen in the last 2 or so years brighter days than they saw in the preceding 9 years. And we can anticipate that those same towns, Nain and surrounding places, will get back into a position of doldrum if certain things are not done. And one of the most important things I want to urge the government to do is the issue of providing water, especially for those persons who are engaged in farming. One of the reasons why whenever there's a drought, our growth figures are affected so terribly because of the importance of agriculture to our growth. And if this project that has been in implementation phase for so long, if that could be expedited so that water can come as quickly as possible to these towns, it could curtail some of the hardship. I think it might be useful. The Minister of Industry, I see is rising, but there are many small businesses that operate in and around that area. Perhaps some special assistance could be provided to enable them to become a little bit more efficient, to expand into other areas, because you are going to get a significant fallout if the plant remains closed for an extended period of time. And the Minister has indicated that this could be beyond 2 years. Perhaps he could shed some light. Today, if there is a specific commitment that has been given by GISCO as to how long the plant will be closed and when it will be reopened, and whether or not the concessions that were provided, given to them for the relief of the bauxite levy, if the term would be expanded to encourage them to continue to do the investment and to eventually get the plant up to a point where it will be a modern, expanded facility utilizing the latest in energy resources. You mentioned in your statement that the work of the member from Central Clarendon will be affected by the closure of the plant and by extension the project, because the project that the member was working on was the establishment of this economic zone. So I would like to understand, because I suspect that if GISCO is closing its operations to enable it to reestablish a refinery, where does the economic zone fit into this, or is that on pause for this period during which the plant will be closed? I have some further questions to ask, or perhaps the Minister could deal with those.
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Dahl, go ahead.
On mining and energy has made this comment. Early on in the year, I think it was about June, the NW, the BITU, and UCASE signed a memorandum of understanding with GISCO that they would keep the workers that they have on quid pro quo. Now, my understanding of what came out in the public space, they would keep the workers but would not raise wages. That was the reason why it was signed. Can you make a comment on that? Well, okay. Secondly, how many workers will be kept on by the company while during this period of closure? A plant don't close and turn out everybody, send them home. I would like to know how many workers, if you know, will be kept on while the plant closed for refurbishing or whatever. And my third question, my third suggestion, in any council that is established, I'm sure you would understand and accept that the workers have a representative on such council.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Tweed, go ahead.
will the Minister say what are the earnings from the reopened GISCO plant that Jamaica has gleaned over the period that it has been operating? Will the Minister further state what are the repercussions for our growth figures with the impending closure? My recollection is that mining is about, 2.5% of GDP. What is this going to do to those projections? Thirdly, will the Minister just clarify something in his statement that the Japanese took over a plant that had been constructed, the Chinese, excuse me, took over a plant that had been constructed on a premise or at a time when oil was $2 a barrel? And further, would the Minister, may I draw the Minister's attention to private member's motion number 71, be it resolved that this Honourable House cause to be carried out a cost-benefit analysis of the Jamaican bauxite and alumina industry in order to determine the prudent and efficient use of this diminishing natural resource, and inquire of the Minister whether he would be cooperative in having this matter dealt with as soon as possible, because this is a part of a general question that has to be answered as to the expectations of the nation in respect of this industry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and let me thank my colleagues for the suggestions and questions. Let me start at the back end. The call for the cost-benefit analysis, as indicated elsewhere, it is something I support. As a matter of fact, I've had discussions with the PIOJ, and they have undertaken to do that cost-benefit analysis, because I too have some questions from my perspective, being a non-miner coming into an industry. So that is on way by the PIOJ. They did not give me a time, but I will get back to you with a time. With regards to the growth projections, I can tell you that mining, colleague, accounts for 50% of the growth figures. It is the third largest foreign exchange earner, and it employs some 5,000 persons directly in high-paying jobs, and indirectly some 25,000 Jamaicans depend upon it. It will certainly affect our growth projections, and the Ministry of Finance has not yet finished shaking out the figures. And therefore, as soon as that is done, those projections are done. As you will realize, the time was very short, and they are now working to treat with that, and we will update as quickly as we can. The earnings from GISCO would, of course, be in the PIOJ documentation, but I could ask them to separate that and update you at a later date. With regards to the matter on the unions, as I had indicated in my statement, that yes, the unions have pledged before this news the whole matter of industrial peace. The three unions came together under the auspices of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. The management and the unions are now meeting. They met yesterday and they are continuing to meet to settle on the amount of workers that will be kept, both for the maintenance and also to assist in the modernization program. So there is ongoing discussion. With regards to the member from East Kingston and Port Royal, just to inform, sir, that I do feel a little bit at bay, because I had in my plans that when we came back from recess, I would have had good news to tell you when the mining council would have started. Matter of fact, the projected date would have been Thursday of this week. But we submitted the documentation to Cabinet Office, and you understand how that process works, and I'm sure Cabinet Office will treat with the matter quickly, because I wouldn't want to restart the mining council without the blessings of Cabinet. And there are 24 spaces from various institutions, including the opposition and the workers, that will be seated on the mining council, because I gave you an undertaking during the sectorial debate, and we are moving to revive the council. So you have my word. As soon as we pass it through the necessary process, we will begin. With regards to Windalco, we did meet with the other players in the industry, and I know Windalco, they are in the final stages of a discussion with the Ministry of Energy in terms of the overall energy plan going forward. They have some ideas and some projections, and they are looking at it, but what they said in those discussions, they want to be sure that they fit within the overall energy projections of the country, and they don't stay outside of that overall energy plan. So I know they are in the final stages of those discussions with the Ministry of Energy, but they have, I'm sure you would know, they have completed the projects that they had undertaken under the initial waiver, and that has brought some level of efficiency to the plan. But the energy matter has to be dealt with, and they are moving to treat with that. With regards to NAIN, it is a consideration, but with the closure, temporary closure, but also remember that the modernization and upgrading is also one of the largest investments in our economy, so that it is not that the plant is being closed and mothballed. There will be activity, economic activities will be ongoing, and some workers will be employed. So it will affect the business life of the community, there's no doubt, but it won't be as bad as when the plant was mothballed. And in addition to the water, the people at GISCO, they are committed for the long term. They have indicated that they are committed in treating with the plan. And in terms of the water, they have said they will continue to undertake the trucking of water to where they would, the treatment with the Red Mud Lake, continue covering and wetting the lake. And from the government's point of view, let me remind you that the Essex Valley Water Scheme, the domestic portion of it, will come on stream within the next 4 to 6 weeks, so that the communities of Nain and Junction will no longer be dependent upon trucked water or intermittent water or rainfall, but they will have, as a result of the deliberate actions of this government, under the minister with responsibility for water, the Prime Minister, they will have proper domesticated piped water. The irrigation section is ongoing as wells are being drilled and treated with, and the irrigation portion of the Essex Valley development will come on stream sometime next year. But we can give you a better date, at a startup date at a later time. So I really would like, Mr. Speaker, to thank my colleagues and, okay.
Yes, before you thank us, Minister, just to be clear on the feasibility, because it is my understanding that the refurbishing work is subject to a completion of the feasibility and the plans. So I need to know whether or not that has been done, because it's my view that it is in the process, because your timeline for temporary closure must relate to that. I think the Jamaican people would like to be clear that there is a definite timeline, so the plant is going to be temporarily shut for a period of time, and probably you could indicate to us what is the ironclad commitment that you have received from the company in terms of that timeline.
I wouldn't say ironclad, member, but the indicative timeline is 18 to 24 months. They said within the next 30 days. And one of the reasons why I like to shy away from precise dates is because a lot of the factors are not in our control. They are shipping, the bulk of the equipment needed is already on ground. If you visit the plant, you will see a lot of equipment and containers with equipment already on the ground. And a lot of the parts are en route and others are on order. You, more than anybody else, will appreciate that the equipment used in a refinery is specialized equipment. And it also relates to the type of bauxite that is fed into this equipment. With regards to the feasibility for a number of the upgrades, they have completed some are still ongoing. I know they were looking at relocating, because initially they were moving to do one production line, and they were going to continue production while they did one line. They now have to move that line from where it was, because the plans that they have of the existing refinery, a number of things they have found in excavating, like for example cables, pipes that were not on the plans, and therefore they don't have a handle of some of the things. I know over the years you patch here, you pitch here, so they are going to be moving from that location, that specific line, to a virgin area, brand new area, because they are not sure of some of the things that run under the line, under the plant, and all of that. So that aspect of it. But the rest of the thing with the power plant, etc., they have completed those. But I know they are going to move one of the production lines entirely from where it was. They actually had started to pour foundation when they discovered they ran into a number of issues. And that's one of the reasons I don't want to give a hard and fast date. Because as you know, when you are repairing something, as you pull one thing, you buck up into something else. And what I don't want is the Honorable Opposition spokesperson and mining to come back here in 6 months' time when they buck up on something unexpected and want to hold me accountable for that. And let me, before I take my seat, remind you that the plant is not owned by the government of Jamaica. It is owned 100% by GISCO. So we have to listen to them, hear them, and then we come and update the House, as I have pledged to do.
Minister, just one other question. In the latter part of my term, we visited the idea, because it's a global industry, of a global cooperation body, similar to the one that was set up in the 70s, the International Bauxite Association. And it was felt by the producers to be a very worthwhile body to reestablish. And perhaps you might want to reflect on that as we recognize the global nature of this industry and the need now, as more and more players are getting involved, for countries like Jamaica to cooperate to ensure that we are able to maximize our benefits.
Mr. Speaker, may I have a clarification to my earlier question? May I seek a clarification to an earlier answer?
Go ahead, Mr. Tree.
Mr. Speaker, will the Minister tell this House how we are paid, how Jamaica is paid from the activities of DISCO? Is it the levy? Is it the profit share? Apart from the employment and the prospects of the further development of which he speaks, and we know, how are we paid and in what measure? Secondly, will the Minister please state whether with all of this taking place in St. Elizabeth, what is the position regarding the reclamation of those lands which have been mined and which, if there is a protracted shutdown, will remain, to use a nice word, fallow for a longer period of time than the economy of that area or Jamaica could possibly entertain?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me thank the members for their intervention. Mr. Speaker, to the opposition spokesman, the idea of the International Bauxite Federation, it is a timely thought, and I am sure we will give due consideration to the proposal, but that has to be aligned with the cost-benefit analysis of the industry, because you will recognize the value of the mining industry to the economy in Jamaica. I mean, it has, some persons want to have it as the favorite beating child and beating stick, but we must understand that mining is responsible for 50% of our economic growth. It is the third largest foreign exchange earner. It employs upwards of 5,000 high-paying direct jobs and is responsible for an additional 25,000 indirect jobs. Mining is of value to the economy. Please allow me to finish. When you were running up and down, I didn't interfere with you. And if you had overdone it, so with regards to the activities, royalty, Mr. Speaker, is paid, the bauxite levy, but in the GISCO case, that has been waived. There is royalty that has to be paid per ton of bauxite mined. There is community development, there is the incalculable training and professional development of our people within the area. And you asked about the reclamation. A lot has happened in the last 15 to 20 years with regards to reclamation, because today Jamaica is seen as the leader in the world in terms of how we treat with our mined out pits. In the past, it was not so. It was not so in the past. And not in every instance it is so, but we are getting to where, and the Bauxite Institute is very strong in treating with how you reclaim the land and to have the land back in economic use. Because to just mine out the bauxite, which is a finite resource, and then in a couple of years it is finished, and the question is, what is next? And the question I keep asking and saying to people, the program Life After Bauxite has to take on new life, because people are moved, they have their titles, they are given a nice piece of land, a lovely home, but no title. And we have to, that is a matter that we must treat with, and that this government is treating with, because we have reconstituted the committee chaired by me as minister to treat with some of these problems, because many times little issues that affect normal, ordinary Jamaicans, we tend to brush it aside. Vesting orders has never been used to assist the people with getting their titles, and this government is going to be doing that. We have always used the vesting orders under the Mining Act to help the companies to get titles. Well, we are changing that paradigm. We're moving it. And we will be using vesting orders to assist the over 3,500 persons who are waiting on titles. We have sat with the parish councils, we have sat with the companies, and we have sat with the people. So we're moving to treat with that. We're moving to look at other things to do with the mined out lands. We have introduced greenhouse technology, hydroponics as well. So that, for example, under the tourism linkages program, we have brought the JBI under that program. So you find the clusters of greenhouses now have a contract with a number of hotels who have been clustered, and they produce vegetables for a number of hotels in a cooperative situation. But they themselves, as local farmers, have formed themselves in a cooperative, gotten a contract from the hotels. They wash, they grade, they store, and they supply on a straight business venture. And these are some of the things we want to encourage, because what we want to see in our mining communities is a vibrant economy running parallel to the mining, because life after bauxite, it is a reality, and it is something that we must treat with, and it is something that is getting full attention of this government.
Prime Minister.
Brief statement. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to take the opportunity to make a brief statement to the House on the situation affecting our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago I rose in this Honorable House to speak about the brutality and ferocity of Hurricanes Irma and Maria. At that time I reflected on the words of Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit of Dominica, whose island was totally devastated, when he addressed the 2017 United Nations General Assembly. He said, "Let these extraordinary events elicit extraordinary effort to rebuild nations substantially." And that is the case today for the Bahamas, particularly the islands of Freeport and Abaco. Today, members of this Honorable House will recall the devastating impact of the Category 5 Hurricane Dorian on the neighboring islands of the Bahamas only 9 days ago, on September 1. Mr. Speaker, the intensity of hurricanes in recent times has clearly demonstrated the effect of climate change and the resulting economic impact. Hurricane Dorian packed winds of 185 miles per hour. But what was unique about this hurricane was that it moved at 1 mile per hour. 1 mile per hour. And therefore hovered for many hours over the area it eventually destroyed. As a result, the hardest hit parts of the Bahamas were the Great Abacos and the Grand Bahama Islands. Dorian's movement over the Great Abacos and Grand Bahama lasted approximately 60 hours, which resulted in surge heights, that is, waves being pushed in off the sea, the wave surge, of 18 to 23 feet. So that is enough to cover a two-story building. At last update from the authorities in the Bahamas, there were 50 persons confirmed dead, 42 on Abaco and 8 from Grand Bahama. And Jamaica continues to stand with our brothers and sisters and Bahamian friends during this testing time. I have been in personal contact with Prime Minister Hubert Minnis, who has expressed that this is an extremely difficult period for the people of the Bahamas. Indeed, with the regularity of global events of this magnitude, now more than ever, we have to be our brother's keeper. As this Honorable House is aware, thousands of Jamaicans live and work in the Bahamas. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade has been updated on the situation with Jamaicans in the most impacted areas in the Bahamas. Thankfully, there has been no reports of deaths of Jamaicans as a result of Hurricane Dorian. However, the latest information is that 31 Jamaicans have requested evacuation from the Great Abaco Islands. Of that number, we can confirm that 21 have now been evacuated and are being housed by the Honorary Council. Of course, this is a fluid situation, and this may change by the time of me giving this report. Jamaica is assisting in the relief and reconstruction efforts. Assessments done to date indicate predominantly humanitarian needs, including safe drinking water, shelter, and support for measures to restore power and access. The Red Cross is providing the kind of support services to deal with those who have experienced trauma. In fact, Mr. Speaker, Jamaica, as a member of CARICOM, has responsibility as a regional focal point for the northwestern Caribbean, including Haiti, Belize, the Bahamas, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. In addition to the efforts of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, Jamaica has offered practical help to the Bahamas. A number of key agencies are a part of the response. And these key agencies are the Jamaica Defense Force, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, the Jamaica Red Cross, the Ministry of Tourism, the Jamaica Fire Brigade, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Petrojam, National Water Commission, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the National Spatial Data Management Division, and the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. The agencies report that there has been significant damage to infrastructure, housing, coastal areas of the Northern Islands, and damage to fuel storage. The emergency response so far has included rescue and recovery operations, and these continue. On Saturday, September 7th, I deployed the Jamaica Defense Force Disaster Assistance Response Team to the Bahamas. Previously, through ODPEM, Jamaica sent an oil refinery specialist from Petrojam and a coastal zone specialist from NEPA, and they returned 2 days ago. The Disaster Assistance Response Team from the JDF is currently in the Bahamas, and it is composed of soldiers with various skill sets who are configured to respond to natural disasters in the region. Mr. Speaker, I must highlight that in the spirit of cooperation that exists between Canada and Jamaica, the Canadian Air Force have assisted us with the provision of a C-130 aircraft to provide airlift to transport the members of the disaster assistance team to perform the requisite tasks. The disaster response team will undertake: one, they will assist the government of the Bahamas with the reconstruction of temporary accommodations, that is with tents. They will assist with the establishment of relief distribution areas. They will assist with aid convoy protection. They will assist with clearing of distribution routes. They will conduct key point protection. They will assist the government of the Bahamas with security tasks as requested. and they will assist with the re-establishment of power supply. The government of Jamaica has established a donation account through the National Commercial Bank, NCB, Oxford Road branch, and the account number is 212-387-304. Let me repeat. The government of Jamaica has established a donations account to support our brothers and sisters who have been affected in the Bahamas. The account is at the National Commercial Bank, Oxford Road branch, and the account number is 212-387-304. The name of the account is ODPEM Donation Account. Mr. Speaker, we continue to monitor and assess the situation, and we will respond as required. We encourage all Jamaicans to donate to the effort. The major need now, of course, would be for any assistance that would help the people of the Bahamas, in particular the affected areas, in providing potable water. So pumps, mobile treatment plants, that kind of equipment would be very useful. Mr. Speaker, this statement is obviously to update Jamaica on the situation in the Bahamas, but I believe I should take the opportunity to say to Jamaicans that the season appears to be a very active one. Already there are 3 disturbances that could be upgraded to tropical cyclones. So they are not at that point yet, but they are being monitored. Jamaica should be prepared. And I'm saying this bearing in mind what has happened to the Bahamas. Jamaicans should be prepared. And this means stocking up on the supplies that you would need in the event of a storm. Your candles, your batteries, your canned food, your water supply, warm clothing. Also, Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to say to persons who live in low-lying areas or areas that have in the past been flood-prone or have been affected in times of hurricanes, that whilst your property is important, I would think that your life is more important than your property. And so it is wise, now we are in the hurricane season, to start putting together your alternative plans. Make contact with those relatives that you have in safer areas or friends that you have in the event that you have to evacuate. Plan out your routes, your mode of transportation if the worst should happen. Mr. Speaker, we have already started as a government to put in place our response plans. We always have plans in place. The ODPEM and all the agencies that are involved in first response in the event of a hurricane, we always have these plans in place. We're meeting constantly. But given what has happened in 2017, when we experienced 2 Category 5 hurricanes that wiped out entire countries, and then what has happened now, I believe we have to intensify our planning. And I have always held the view that when we were threatened by Hurricane Matthew, that it is important that the Parliament is mobilized and that MPs, which are not necessarily trained as first responders, but the truth is, that is the truth, that the MPs oftentimes would be the first symbol of state authority in the communities, along with the councillors. And we see the response in the Bahamas where people have said they are not seeing the response from the state. And I can well imagine the stress that the government is under, given the spatial distribution of the island and the requirement for airlift and sea lift, that it can really stretch government resources. But it is always important that there is at least a voice from the political representation to ensure that people have a sense of direction and feel some level of confidence that the government will respond. So, Mr. Speaker, in thinking about if there were to be, God forbid, any form of natural disaster affecting Jamaica, in having a comprehensive plan, I'm saying in this House that members of Parliament should start to put together their own plans. And yes, you have to do that, because you know your constituency best. When the emergency response teams have to come from Kingston or wherever else we have to mobilize them from, they would need to have a contact person, a point person, and oftentimes that would have to be the Member of Parliament. So I'm urging MPs to start thinking in this way, looking in your constituency to see the communities that may be at risk, start to make contact with them so that they are prepared to move if they have to move. Start the conversation about evacuation and how you will secure those areas that are evacuated. All of those pre-planning is necessary for recovery and resilience. So, Mr. Speaker, with those comments, I commend my statement to the House.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I think it's important for me to express on behalf of this side of the House that we join with the government of Jamaica and indeed with all the Jamaican people in solidarity with the people of the Bahamas in the face of the terrible disaster which has struck them in the form of Hurricane Dorian. And we also support the extension of assistance from the government and people of Jamaica to the Bahamian authorities. I know not only is the JDF doing its bit, but also private organizations. And I would also like to encourage those who can to make a contribution to the Bahamian people by way of the account or the provision of supplies. The fact is that I would say the Caribbean is facing increasing risk from these climate-related activities, particularly from hurricanes, on account of global warming. And yet the response to our vulnerability from the global community certainly would need to be much greater than is the case, given our small size, the potential for devastation of our entire countries from these types of hurricane activity. The intensity of the hurricanes are greater now. And I suspect in the case of Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, that the loss of life is going to eventually turn out to be much worse than is presently being reported, for the simple reason that the islands are low-lying, and in many instances the sea just literally flooded over the entire islands, and many of the missing persons, which number in the hundreds according to reports I have received, are likely to remain missing without any confirmation, because many have been taken out to sea. I believe that it behooves all of us in the Caribbean, in the face of this, to join our voices in agitating at the level of the international communities for a much more robust response to the issue of small states and their vulnerabilities. I know that we have tried to ensure for ourselves through the CRIF originally, the Caribbean Regional Insurance Fund, and that I understand that a review of the possibilities is being undertaken by the World Bank. But even so, we run the risk every hurricane season that the cost of meeting disaster relief is beyond our capability, and and worse yet, in the event of the hurricane in Bahamas, as was the case with the earthquake in Haiti, after the initial disaster and the initial response of the international community, help tends to drift away and the countries are left to shoulder this responsibility. So I really want to urge a very robust effort to really bring the situation of our small countries to the attention of the international community, and not just the governmental community internationally, but indeed the more conscious non-governmental organizations who have an interest in these matters. To the matter of local preparations, Prime Minister, we need to be prepared, as you have said, and I agree with that. But I would think preparation is going to involve a much more comprehensive attention to drainage in particular than is taking place now. Some time ago, I urged that we create a national flood relief plan, that we review our drainage arrangements across. In fact, it was on the occasion of recurrent flooding in Clarendon. I have had the direct experience over the last 2 days of having areas, and this was not a hurricane level rainfall, this was heavy rain that occurred yesterday, 2 days ago, that communities adjacent to Hagley Park Road have been flooded out, communities which did not suffer that kind of flooding before. And I would urge that we pay attention to some of the drainage patterns which would have been affected by the road work just recently done. I am in my constituents are suffering from man-made water disasters. The first sufferation is caused by the lack of water because the piping was interrupted along the Constant Spring Road by the road work. And then the second is flood. So we have none on the one hand and too much on the other hand. And it is a tragedy in their lives. What I want to mention in particular, when you say we need to prepare for the relief, the MPs, I support that. But I want to say that equally, and we should be paying attention to the preventive part of the equation. And in doing so, MPs will need the assistance of NWA. The problem is that we really need some water engineers. Apart from the money, we need some people who can look at what has happened to the normal drainage patterns, because over the years we have approved construction in areas that were floodplains. We have approved road work which impedes some of the natural drainage, and the correction of these deficiencies are way beyond anything that is at the disposal of a member of parliament individually, whether through the provisions of CDF or of the provision of disaster mitigation, $1 million here, $1 million here. We are running the risk, especially in light of these increasingly intense weather events, of a huge disaster, even without it reaching to the level of a Category 5 hurricane. So I want to urge, and I think this is an area that could usefully be explored by the House Committee on Infrastructure with the cooperation of the appropriate government agencies, because we are seeing more and more this kind of unforeseen flooding taking place in communities which previously were not prone to that kind of flooding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Tweed.
Mr. Speaker, very briefly, the House may know that a number of schools in the Bahamas have been destroyed by the hurricane, and I wish to inform that the Roman Catholic Diocese in Jamaica has offered to do what we did when there was the volcanic eruption in Montserrat some time ago, that the children who are displaced, an invitation has been made for them to come to Jamaica to be enrolled in the schools commensurate with their levels and kept for a period in order that they may not miss their lessons due to the destruction. And maybe there are other institutions that can make similar gestures. The second thing is that I'd like to remind the Prime Minister that some time ago, when we were dealing with the previous natural disasters, he warmed to the idea of the Caribbean community arranging to have a ship properly laid out and available, one for the Northern Caribbean and one, hopefully we could get two, for the Eastern Caribbean. One of the difficulties reported in the international press is that many of those affected in Abaco and Grand Bahama have nowhere to go and have been prejudiced, some lost their lives, because there was no capacity to move them to areas of safety. And very often, the capacity to bring in relief in appropriate time is also compromised because of transportation difficulties. And I really wish to encourage Jamaica as a leader in the Caribbean community to approach the international community in this way, this manner, just as the leader of the opposition has suggested. But for the outfitting of relief vessels which can be available for quick response, this would be a most affordable and efficient way of our responding in instances like this. I trust that those ideas may be helpful on the international scene. In respect of local preparation, Mr. Speaker, we in central Kingston receive the garbage and the effluent from everywhere up north. And in fact, you know, sir, the rains of the last couple of days have been almost a blessing. When I visited Tex Lane and Conrad Lane 3 days ago, there was 3 and 4 inches of scum, of human excrement, and the offal from a chicken rendering plant, creating a public health nuisance. All of that is gone now, but guess where it's gone, Mr. Speaker? Into Kingston Harbour. And recently we had an approach from the National Solid Waste Management, which was most encouraging. And it was to establish berms so that solid waste could be trapped and then removed. Regretfully, the time frame for that to begin has long passed, and we fear that we're going to be disappointed. And I just encourage the Prime Minister and the members of government that if we could do something like this, entirely affordable, entirely efficient, it could save Kingston Harbour and also relieve much of the distress of the inner city communities which border the sea. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you speak about preparedness for an active season, and at the beginning of the hurricane season, we were given an amount to do some mitigation. I've always said that the amount that is given, especially for rural constituencies, are woefully inadequate. And seeing the rains that we have gotten over the last couple of days, and if that is an indication of the type of water that we'll be seeing on our roadways and even in some areas, is there going to be a consideration for additional funds for true mitigation? Because we keep on saying that we should prepare, but there are actually no resources for members of parliament to actually prepare in our constituencies for the type of weather patterns that we have seen coming. And I say this because, coming off of what the presentation from the leader of the opposition, a year or two ago there was a lot of flooding in Clarendon area, right? Down in the Four Parts area, Osborne Store. In previous presentations I've spoken about, even just in periods like this, since we don't know when the rain is going to come, even just the basic clearing of those earth drains. Because one of the challenges that they face is that they're not able to carry the capacity of water that is now coming. And in many instances you see water coming from areas that you have never seen it coming from before. Will the government be putting more resources in mitigation now that we're coming into the active part of the hurricane season? And the second question, I think it was either yourself or the Minister of Finance who spoke about in the budget presentation about a disaster fund. And the question is, have we started to put monies in that fund? So, $2 billion was in the budget. So is that fund in place? And have we now put that $2 billion in place in case of any disaster that would have come our way?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, I've been, like everyone, we've been watching the developments in the Bahamas, and we share the concern, and we see the magnitude of the damage and the problems the country faces. And I agree with you that we have to take sleep and mark death. In that vein, Prime Minister, I've been saying for quite some time in this House and elsewhere that the situation facing the communities in Western St. Andrew, the low-lying areas in Seaview and Duane Park and New Haven, are really present a clear and present danger. And it doesn't have to arise from any category 5. It's even just there's some constant rainfall, like what happened yesterday in a deluge of rain. And I constantly, when you make representation, as I have, written representation to the various agencies, and a response come to say you have $1 million to clean drain in a preventative measure, I don't even know what to do with it. I really don't know where to start, and I've said that time and time and time again. And the Sandy Gully right now, trees are growing mountains. has appeared in the Stand Gully.
Right now, 1 million can't clear that.
I don't know what to
And that is not
do with that. And I've been, I've written, I've spoken about it.
Must clean that.
And the fact is,
Not MP.
it's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And Prime Minister, I urge, in the interest of these communities, that something be done urgently. And it can't be no $1 million. I don't know what to do with $1 million.
NWA has to take it as a project.
I don't know what to do with $1 million. I don't know where to begin.
The sea mouth of a clean, so you can't clean up this.
And again, it is simply for me, every time I watch the videos in the Bahamas, I get nightmares. I really do. Because something is waiting to happen. Gullies in Kuala Lumpur, gullies are breaking, canals are breaking apart. I've written several emails, several letters, I have them, and nothing has been done. Nothing has been done. I make this appeal to the House and to you, Prime Minister, to the Ministry of Works. They need to act on it and act immediately on it, because something is a clear and present danger that it represents. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the members for their contribution to the statement that I have made. Several important points have been raised. The Leader of the Opposition mentioned that there needs to be a master drainage study. Nationally and locally, Kingston and St. Andrew. I wish to remind the Leader of the Opposition that a master drainage study was conducted by the NWA some time ago and was completed, I believe, last year. And I had mentioned it in my budget presentation. And that gives a comprehensive overview of the gaps in our drainage system nationally. As it relates to Kingston specifically, you've raised another issue, which is that the construction of new roadways, and not just for Kingston, but also for Clarendon in particular, where you have in northern and north central Clarendon where that new road has been constructed. Those roads literally become waterways, and they channel water, and the drains that were built, some of these drains 50 years ago, cannot carry the volume of water that is now coming down on these roads. And therefore, when the roads overflow and the drains are undersized, the water stays on the road for longer than it should, and therefore properties on the sides will get flooded. We have now issued, have done the request for proposals for a drainage design for Kingston and St. Andrew. Hopefully they will go to contracting within a month, and the period of design will be about 6 months. So hopefully we'll have that ready in terms of the major drains that will need to be reconstructed or new drains to be put in for Kingston and St. Andrew. Having said that, the issue is how do we fund this? And in my budget presentation, I mentioned the Greater Infrastructure Development Program, which will be the replacement of MIDP. And in that presentation, I also said that yes, we will be focusing on roads, but we will be also focusing on gullies and drains as part of the infrastructure development. We should be seeking to have a new agreement as to how that should be funded soon, and I will bring the House up to date before the year is out as to where the funding would come from, because as you can imagine, these are not small works. These would be major works. Well, remember, I mean, it is a good idea, except that when we're using private funds for infrastructure, the issue is you would always want the infrastructure to be generating some income. So, otherwise you'll be just using taxpayers' money at an interest rate that might be higher, whereas if you fund it out of your budget. Some of these projects will be funded from the budget and has to be, especially those that are emergency projects. The other thing I would say,
given the enormity of the task and supporting the need for the work to be done, I'd want to urge that the planned work, be at least subject to some consultation with our master builders and the wider community, because it's going to be a lot of money, as you have said. We're going to get one shot at this, and I think not the wider community, and certainly some of the people affected would like an opportunity before we put shovel into soil to make certain that what we're funding and what we're paying for is really going to answer the need.
Member, we have no objection to that. In fact, that I consider it necessary. The areas that would be affected by this new drainage plan would be the Tinson Pen, Maxfield Avenue areas, my constituency, your constituency, Western, St. Andrew, which are the areas that normally get flooded. In fact, that is where my constituency, because that is where the sandy gully comes and deposits. Your constituency, you get the solid waste, not so much of the flooding. Yes, not so much of the flooding. And I'm going to address the solid waste issue separately. You're looking at between 100 to 150 million US dollars worth of work in this area to correct it. And that is, as I've said, not a small undertaking. The other areas that we are looking at now to have specific plans which will fit into the national drainage plan would be Maypen, Santa Cruz, and Port Maria. Those are areas that flood regularly. So just to assure members that the government is working towards this. But I would want to alert members as well. The point that you have raised, I'm sympathetic towards them. I'm a member of parliament as well. I face the same issues. And sometimes I want to turn to the Minister of State and say, what is this? But then I realize that because the reality is it all has to fit within the national budget. But I want members to also note that the last rains that fell a day or so ago, and then there was this flooding. And then you will recall last year there was a major flooding on Marcus Garvey Drive. The issue there is, yes, the undersized drains. But if you were to go and inspect it for yourself, you would see that the level of solid waste, particularly plastics, continue to block the inlets to the drains. And it prevents water from coming off. So when I'm saying the small amount of money that you get, and I agree it's a small amount of money, if we could just use it to clear the entrances to the inlets for the water to run off, that would be of great help. The $1 million, I'm not saying that you can use that for bushing or to actually clean an entire gully invert, but to clear the openings. Because this season seems as if it is going to be active, the Cabinet goes to retreat next week, and we will raise this issue to make it a national priority and to determine whether or not more allocations can be made in this regard. So you will hear more. No, well, it would have to be. No, what they do is we try to give the MPs funding at the beginning of the cycle. So we have 3 cycles, and so you get 3 rain cycles we predict, including the hurricane season, and so we give you funding at the beginning so you can do the preventative maintenance that is necessary. And I'm agreeing with you, it is not enough.
I just want to say, since you're going on the retreat, and I've been saying for quite a while now that that amount, the $1 million that we're given, and especially for the size of rural constituencies, and the amount of critical drains, because they're basically, you have to use it on those critical drains, is woefully inadequate with the amount of NWA roads. The parish council themselves, the municipal councils try and do some, but it is also inadequate of what the municipal councils do. We're not able to use that money that we get from NWA on those municipal council roads in cleaning those critical drains. In rural constituencies, most of the drains are earth drains, and the cost to clean them is actually what we would have gotten, that $1 million to clean one of those earth drains, because you're talking about the stones and removing the debris from it, the silt from it. And not wanting to get more just because we're rural, but I think we have to look at the amount of critical drains within these rural constituencies. And constituencies vary, because in urban constituencies, at least NWA will do some of the drain cleaning on a regular basis. In rural, they don't. So, no, they should. But I'm just saying to you, Prime Minister, because it is an issue. You try to do it in tranches, but it is inadequate, because the same drains that we clean at the beginning of the season, when we get the second tranche, is the same drains that we have to end up cleaning, because those are the same critical drains.
In relation to the vulnerable parishes, especially St. Thomas, St. Mary, Portland, where you are the seacoast, right there, you know. And so part of the problem you have, Prime Minister, is that when you get that small sum to deal with mitigatory work, it just don't make, it really don't add up. And at the back end now, if you look, just ask NWA to look at from the back end, just to clear the roads, run you millions of dollars, just to clear it. Even one lane is a whole, you're spending 20, 30, 40 million just to clear these roads when they are blocked. And we know the areas. I could tell you every critical drain going from Morant Bay to the border in Portland. And so what we're saying is not just the appeal for more money, but just for sensible planning in relation to why would you hold back a few dollars here and you know it is going to come once you get the major rainfall. And so that's my appeal.
Members, I want you to know that in me there is a sympathetic ear, and so too in the Minister of Finance. The issue is that spending envelope that we cannot breach. So the issue is not that. The issue is really now one of priority. What is it that we not do now, but do this instead? And that is what the retreat will look at, how we can make this a priority. I am of the view that this hurricane season will be so active, even in just the rainfall that we will get, which we desperately need, that we should make the necessary provisions. I can't tell you how much it will be now, but we have to make some provision. Just to say that the money that we have set aside, which the Minister of Finance announced in his presentation in the budget debate of $2 billion, would be for what you call catastrophic events, not regular events. So, and it will have a legislative scheme around which it can be accessed. So this is for major events that would threaten the continuation of government that you would actually need to access, not for regular events. So remember, this presentation was not so much about our own preparedness, but to acknowledge what has happened in the Bahamas, to alert the Jamaican people that we are responding and assisting as best as we can, and if we are called upon to do more, and we can, we will, and to assure the Jamaican people that though we have sent some troops there, 120 to 130, we preemptively expanded our disaster assistance response team. So we have over 400 men who can respond if something were to happen elsewhere or here. So we have capacity to manage. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Speaker, please, Mr. Speaker, having heard from the Prime Minister and other members, could the House formally put this in a resolution and send to the people of the Bahamas? My recommendation, on behalf of the House, formally, could we send something off to the people of Bahamas, coming from the Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, I should be going to the Bahamas, I'll be confirming later. I should be visiting the Bahamas on Thursday. So if members have a check, yes, we'll send. So the issue, so the Bahamas would have, by virtue of their proximity to the U.S., certainly, I mean, the basic aid and so forth should not be a challenge, but the rebuilding exercise and the equipment to get them potable water, that would be of use. So if we wanted to make a contribution, we could.
Clarification.
From the Parliament. Yes. Send a message from the Parliament.
Clarification, Prime Minister, clarification. You mentioned the fund, the NCB, and you said it was in the name of ADPEM. Did it reference at all in a sub-account or anything the Bahamas? So if you...
Let me check out the record. People want to hear.
Yeah, if you send it, is it go to the ADPEM for general matters or for the Bahamas?
My notes, and I'm reading from my notes, which I suspect they would have confirmed this before it was given to me. So my notes are saying that the name of the account is the ADPEM donation account. And what would go into this account, starting from when we have declared the number, would be all utilized towards the effort in the Bahamas.
Mr. Daly, I've been advised that the Speaker has already sent a letter to the Speaker of the House in Bahamas in relation to your observation. Yes.
The Prime Minister brought a presentation here regarding the situation in the Bahamas. Several members have spoken, have expressed condolence and whatever. It's 50 odd people today they've found killed, dead. We're saying the Parliament having met today sends its regards and its whatever. We know the nice things to the people of Bahamas through the Parliament. We would like the people of Bahamas to hear that today's sitting of Parliament, we discuss their plight and we send a joint statement to them, whatever you want to say in a statement. That's the usual thing, not the Speaker to the Speaker.
Okay. House Leader.
No.
Mr. Chuck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was a great honor that, and through you to the honorable members, that I inform the House that an international settlement agreement resulting from mediation, which will be known as the Singapore Convention, was signed by me on behalf of Jamaica on September the 7th, this year in Singapore. Mr. Speaker, on the 28th of December 2018, by Resolution 73 of 198, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the United Nations Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation and authorized that a signing ceremony for the opening for signature be convened in Singapore in August 2019. This convention was adopted in recognition of the value of mediation as a method for settling cross-border commercial disputes. Mr. Speaker, while mediation is increasingly used in international and commercial domestic practices as an alternative to arbitration and litigation, there was previously no international mechanism for effective enforcement of settlement agreements resulting from its use. According to Mr. Speaker, the Singapore Convention will ensure that settlements reached by parties are, firstly, binding, secondly, enforceable, and thirdly, will promote mediation as an alternative and effective means of resolving cross-border disputes. It is therefore expected, Mr. Speaker, to contribute to the development of harmonious international economic relations. Mr. Speaker, the Singapore Convention provides another anchor to peaceful resolution of disputes, the maintenance of the rule of law, ensuring international cooperation and multilateralism. The Government of Singapore, through its Ministry of Law, extended an invitation to the Government of Jamaica through the Ministry of Justice to attend the signing ceremony. According to Mr. Speaker, and based on this government's thrust to position Jamaica as an international hub for alternative dispute resolution, in June 2019, Cabinet approval was sought and received for a delegation of Jamaican officials headed by the Minister of Justice to attend the signing ceremony for the convention, as well as a high-level conference on mediation and international dispute resolution from the 6th of August 2019 to the 10th of August 2019. Mr. Speaker, signing the mediation convention now gives us the full range of options for international dispute resolution. Mediation and arbitration are often considered complementary. For example, the International Bar Association guidelines on conflicts of interest in international arbitration explain that with the parties' consent, an arbitrator may assist them in reaching a settlement through mediation without prejudice to his ability to serve as an arbitrator. Further, Mr. Speaker, research has shown that mediation paired with arbitration has been the preferred mode of alternative dispute resolution by international legal councils. Mr. Speaker, the principle of peaceful settlement of disputes underpins the international legal order. Article 33 of the Charter of the United Nations stipulates that parties must first seek to settle disputes by negotiations, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort to regional agencies or arrangements, or other peaceful means of their own choice. This Honourable House, Mr. Speaker, is reminded that Jamaica ratified the Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards in 2002. This placed us among the over 160 state parties to the Arbitration Convention, which allows the enforcement of arbitral awards in any of those states. In 2017, Mr. Speaker, the House will recall that we adopted the UNCITRAL Model Law and International Commercial Arbitration through the enactment of a new Arbitration Act, and in so doing, modernized the legal mechanism to support international trade and dispute settlement. Prior to the convention, Mr. Speaker, the Singapore Convention, there was uncertainty in the enforceability of international settlements agreements arising from mediation. The effect of this convention was that parties involved in cross-border arrangements resorted to arbitration or other less autonomous modes of dispute resolution. This mediation convention will give investors and state parties the assurance that cross-border mediated settlement agreements can be enforced internationally. Most important to Mr. Speaker, being non-adversarial, mediation preserves the relationship between the parties. Mr. Speaker, it is expected that Jamaica's signing of the Singapore Convention will improve investor confidence in the country and assist in improving our rankings in the ease of doing business assessment. The Singapore Convention was born out of over 3 years of intense stakeholder consultations with academia, mediators, and the private sector in the international commercial space. It was expressed in those consultations that the parties needed an alternative to arbitration and litigation which would not only ensure that disputes were settled, but more importantly, the relationships were preserved. Copies of the articles, Mr. Speaker, are attached and will be available on the website of the House. One of the most important features of the Convention is the fact that state parties have the option of excluding the application of the Convention to settlement agreements to which it or any of its government agencies is a party. Mr. Speaker, I will quickly inform this House that signing the Convention does not make it immediately binding on a state as it is subject to ratification, acceptance, or approval by the signatories. When a state deposits such an instrument, Mr. Speaker, after the entry into force of the Convention, it will take effect for that state 6 months after the date of deposit of its instrument. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, states like Jamaica will have enough time after signature to take the necessary steps to ensure domestic implementation of the Convention. As I've indicated earlier, Mr. Speaker, the Convention deals with mediation for cross-border disputes. However, it is my hope that domestically, mediation will become a major tool in the settlement of disputes. During our visit to Singapore, Mr. Speaker, we learned that many countries, including Singapore, have benefited from greater use of mediation to resolve domestic disputes, court cases, as an alternative to litigation. We also learned that many law firms, Mr. Speaker, in Singapore earn most of their income through mediation and arbitration. One firm reported as much as 67% of total income was through use of these alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So, Mr. Speaker, we intend to follow suit here in Jamaica because we believe that Jamaica can reap the economic benefits of settling disputes amicably and expeditiously. Mr. Speaker, I will be consulting with the Honourable Chief Justice with a view to making mediation at the parish court automatic under certain circumstances. It's not now, it's discretionary. Currently, the court has the power to refer both criminal and civil matters to mediation, but it is discretionary. In order to increase the use of this dispute resolution mechanism, all stakeholders will have to come on board in convincing disputing parties of the benefits of mediation. Remember that mediation is automatic for civil litigation in the Supreme Court, and this has helped to reduce the number of matters that proceed to trial at that level. In pursuance, Mr. Speaker, of greater use of mediation in the courts, the Ministry of Justice has embarked on a program of training more mediators in all the parishes, and we hope to improve their technical capacity by inviting seasoned, experienced, professional mediators from abroad to assist us in best practices. I will be appealing to the judiciary and the legal profession to place greater emphasis on mediation, which is not only cost-effective, but when successfully undertaken, will reduce the burden on the courts, maintain relationships, and result in savings generally. In essence, Mr. Speaker, we will be putting in place mediation centers alongside the justice centers in all the parishes. We expect that attorneys will be trained in mediation alongside the many mediators we have across the parishes. And we're hoping that if we can increase the jurisdiction of the parish courts from 1 million now to a higher figure, that more cases will be going to the parish courts, but in more cases going to the parish courts, then they will need assistance, and mediation is that alternative path to a settlement. It seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that the courts are not only overburdened, it will be absolutely impossible for them to try all the cases that come there. And even though the judges are making a gallant effort to reduce the backlog, Jamaica has become highly litigious. But it is time that we persuade Jamaicans that mediation is the better approach, in settling disputes and settle them oftentimes before they come to court, but when they come to court, to be assisted even further. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to indicate that with this statement that we intend to put in place a mediation act eventually, and having done so shortly, we want mediation to be the major tool for the settlement of disputes in Jamaica.
Mr. Goldie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, well, thank you for your statement. And of course, one can only say that the signing of a convention such as this one is a good thing for Jamaica. I think it is recognized that alternative dispute resolution mechanisms are critical in order to avoid some of the delays and costs that are inherent in litigating disputes through formal mechanisms such as the courts. So this is a logical step for Jamaica to take. As you have mentioned, we have a new arbitration act based on the UNCITRAL model law. We are hoping that Jamaica might become a recognized center for arbitration. I haven't seen much progress in that direction yet, but it is certainly something which we fully support and endorse. And this, I assume, will be to add the mediation piece to that, in a sense, by allowing mediation, which is a less formal and perhaps less expensive procedure than arbitration, to become part of the sort of arsenal of dispute settlement, which is an interesting juxtaposition of concepts, but an arsenal of dispute settlement mechanisms that Jamaica has. It being an international agreement, this convention, for it to have effect in domestic law, it would require legislation to achieve that. You mentioned an intention to pass a mediation act at some time in the future. I don't know if that is designed to operationalize this convention additional. So the domestic operationalization of this convention will require domestic legislation to achieve that. Until we have that, it really won't serve the local purpose that we would want it to serve. But it's a step, a very important step, further down a pathway, which is to provide
Hello, I'm Dr. Carlton Bird, Speaker Director for Breath of Life Television Ministries, and I want to encourage you to watch Breath of Life right here on PBCJ.
I
had tried to kill myself many times, trying to hang myself, tried using knife.
Thinking about suicide is normally because you feel hopeless, you feel a lot of pain, you feel that there is no way out.
I feel conflicted about the young men who make a living by wiping windscreens. These men and boys prey on females with no mercy.
This is a woman's world.
The corrupt are getting away too often. Help catch them now. Jamaicans must call 1-800-CORRUPT.
Yes!
Enforce the law. One law for all. If convicted and found guilty, lock them up. It's our money that's being wasted. Lock them up. Stop the corruption. Build integrity. A message from National Integrity Action.
As long as you are beautiful on the inside, everything else falls into place. You're always beautiful on the outside, as long as the inside is beautiful.
I really think that beauty is, forming an independent but positive conclusion of who you are as a person.
Like how you have the diamond in the rough and you take it out of the dirt and you brush it off. I need that, boo. So you don't have to be a sparkly thing. And then them say, and everything with glitter is gold or is beautiful. So you don't have to be this shiny thing or this sparkly thing that the world perceives beauty to be.
Beautiful is how you love, is how you treat others. It's about an independence that you have. It's knowing within yourself that I am beautiful, and it's not because of how I look, but it's because of the type of person, the caring, loving, compassionate person that you are.
We can be, we must be, the generation to eradicate extreme poverty, the generation most determined to fight injustice and inequality, the generation that saves the planet from climate change. To achieve this, we must implement Agenda 2030, a 15-year development plan for everyone, everywhere, with no one left behind. We will live in a world where no one, anywhere, lives in extreme poverty.
We will live in a world where no one goes hungry, where no one wakes up in the morning asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child shall die from diseases we can cure, and proper health care is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where everyone goes to school, and education will give us the knowledge and skills for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all women and all girls
have equal opportunities to thrive, to be powerful and safe.
We can't succeed if half the world is held back.
We all live in a world where people can get clean water, proper toilet at home, at school, and at work.
We will live in a world where there will be sustainable energy for everyone. Heat, light, and power for the planet without destroying the planet.
We live in a world where economies prosper and new wealth leads to decent jobs for everyone.
And we will live in a world
hundreds of thousands of dollars, very meaningful money at the time, could have been resolved. And indeed, it's an opportunity to earn foreign exchange. It's time the legal system should see itself as a foreign exchange earner through this kind of thing. I was never very sanguine about this International Finance Center, you see, sir, and it hasn't come to much, despite best intentions. But this is something that, because of Jamaica's elan and pedigree as a set of reasonable people, English speaking and so on, I have a feeling that this can yield good results. Mr. Speaker, there are some of us whose legal practice involves us in litigation, and we're now getting trial dates in 2023 in the Supreme Court. 2023. Well, the minister carries it even further. When you have an accident and you're a breadwinner or whoever, and your family is at risk, yes? And you have to wait for that length of time in order to simply even get a hearing, you will understand how the system of justice becomes the vehicle for injustice and cruelty. In instances where we can resort to mediation, this is very much to benefit. I have trained as a mediator, sir, in order to be able to assist in this regard. And I recommend it to others of my colleagues who may be long in tooth. But it is significant, maybe long in tooth. Yes. But it is very significant that we should take this to ourselves. I have a suggestion for the minister, though. You know, we have Mr. What's his gentleman's name? Delightful gentleman, Mr. Riley, Horace Riley, singing the benefits of low inflation. Yes? We should be using a public education campaign of similar attractiveness in order to move the Jamaican psyche out of its litigiousness towards mediation. Many people still think that mediation is some kind of soft alternative to winning a man in court. Yes? It is true even in domestic circumstances where it becomes most counterproductive because almost always a child is involved and there's no winners in that. So I'm really encouraging the minister that it needs a strong and consistent program of public education in the most attractive and ubiquitous form in order to get us to the level of usefulness of this venture. It is a good move. Thank you.
Dr. Bromberg.
In just listening to the discussion around the signing of the convention, Singapore Convention, I was thinking, granted this relates to cross-border litigation, but I was thinking that often when we talk about the benefits of mediation, we train mediators, but we do not do it in a context where we are fostering a culture of mediation. And so I wanted to actually just talk a little bit about that part of it and to encourage that when we look at mediation, we don't just look at it for cross-border purposes, but that we look also in terms of what we're doing locally and not just in our courts either. But I also want now to take it to the community level. So I do know that we have had programs before where we have set up mediation centers in our communities and we have trained peer mediators. But I want to suggest that there is more we can do at the local level in terms of building that culture of mediation. So just to go back to what the member was talking about in terms of this culture of litigiousness, I think is what you guys have been saying, that how do we actually now move from it at that level, but to bring it at the community and in our communities, build that culture so that people begin to see it as the preferred method of solving issues at that level, because I think that it would translate at other levels as well.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say, member from Central Kingston, your suggestion is really very important. Indeed, Minister Clark, I want to let you know that we'll be asking in the next budget, or maybe even the supplementary, for a little money to do the very thing to emphasize the importance of mediation. I mean, because if we spend $1 million and we can reduce and solve some of the settlements in the courts, it would have been well spent. So I do, in fact, I mean, I've been putting on various a signboard at the Ministry of Justice, mediate instead of litigate. And that is the sort of thing that we would like to promote. There's no doubt that mediation is important even before it goes to court. The problem is that people don't know about mediation. And that is why, member from Central Kingston, very important that people know where can you go in order to get some settlement. And in the justice centers we're setting up around the island, we hope to have mediation as a feature so that people can go there and find out who they can get as mediators. You know, but we're in the process now of trying to get some trainers of mediators. I don't think we have enough, but we need to have trainers of trainers and also trainers of mediators, because as you quite rightly said, member from South West St. Andrew, mediation is centuries old. The point is that we need to formalize it so that communities can settle matters, not only commercial disputes, but family disputes. Right. Very often it is neighbor disputes, family disputes, and these are the sort of counseling and conciliation. In fact, previously it used to be known as conciliation, but it is now known as mediation, and therefore what you're saying is something we want to promote in these communities to settle a lot of these disputes that actually turn out into violence. So I want to thank you for the suggestion.
Mr. Speaker, the time being after 3:30, may I invite you to ask the House to permit us to continue with questions and answers to questions.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Minister paper numbers 50 to 53, Cabinet Agenda issues dated June 3, 10, 17 and 24 of 2019. Minister paper number 54, an annual report and audited financial statements of the National Irrigation Commission Limited for the year ended March 31, 2017. Minister paper number 55, an annual report of the Firearm Licensing Authority for the period September 1, 2015 to March 31, 2016. Minister paper number 56, an annual report of the Firearm Licensing Authority for the period September 1, 2014 to August 31, 2015. Minister paper number 57, an annual reports and financial statements of the Rural Agricultural Development Authority for the year ended March 31, 2018. Minister paper number 58, an annual report and financial statements of the Banana Board for the year ended December 2017. Minister paper number 59, an annual report of the All Island Jamaica Cane Farmers Association for the year ended September 30, 2017. Minister paper number 60, an annual report of the Police Civilian Oversight Authority for the year 2014-2015. Minister paper number 61 and white paper number 4 of 2019, National Policy on Environmental Management Systems, EMS, in Pursuit of a Green Economy, dated March 2019. White paper number 5, entitled Tourism Networks Policy and Strategy. Minister paper number 62, an annual report of the National Family Planning Board for the year 2016-2017. Minister paper number 63, an annual report of the National Family Planning Board for the year 2017-2018. Ministry Paper number 64, an annual report of the National Health Fund for the year 2016-2017. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Ports Management and Security Limited for the year 2017-2018. Annual report of the Tourism Product and Development Company Limited for the year 2015-2016. Annual report of the Spectrum Management Authority for the year 2017-2018. Annual report of the Early Childhood Commission for the year 2017-2018. The Public Procurement Domestic Margin and Preference Order 29 and the Public Procurement Domestic Margin of Preference Order Resolution 2019 under the Public Procurement Act. The Chief Justice's Hillary Term Statistics report on the Supreme Court for 2019.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motion given orally. Doctor.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move the following motion. The Public Procurement Act, the Public Procurement Domestic Margin of Preference Order 2019 Resolution. Whereas by virtue of Section 60, subsection 1 of the Public Procurement Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make such regulations as he thinks fit to give full effect to the provisions of the Act, and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, regulations may prescribe provisions in relation to A, procedures, standards, and criteria for the various methods and subject matter of procurement. B, the establishment, management, and operation of an electronic procurement system for the public sector. C, the bidding process and procedures. D, the provision of bid security, performance security, and any other security required in connection with procurement proceedings and the execution of procurement contracts. E, the special and differential measures. F, the procedure for the reconsideration of the actions and decisions of procuring entities. G, the procedure for the review of the actions and decisions by the review board, including its powers to make interim or ancillary orders. H, provision in relation to fees. I, forms, including the standard forms of contracts, bidding documents, pre-qualification documents, and any other public procurement related documents developed by the office for use by procuring entities. And J, any other thing required to be prescribed under the Act. And whereas on the 3rd day of July 2018, the Minister made the Public Procurement Regulations 2018 pursuant to paragraphs A, C, D, E, and J of Section 60, subsection 1 of the Act, and whereas it is provided by Section 60, subsection 2 of the Act that regulations made under paragraphs A, C, E, F, and G of Section 60, subsection 1 of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution, and whereas on the 3rd day of July 2018, the Public Procurement Regulations 2018 were affirmed by this Honorable House of Representatives, and whereas by virtue of Regulation 44, subsection 1 of the Public Procurement Regulations 2018, to mitigate the competitive disadvantages of the participating Jamaican suppliers, the Minister may by order, subject to affirmative resolution, prescribe A, the categories of Jamaican bidders eligible to benefit from the application of a domestic margin of preference, and B, the percentage of that margin. And whereas Regulation 44, subsection 2 of the Public Procurement Regulations 2018 specifies that an order made by the Minister under Regulation 44, subsection 1 shall include A, the categories of suppliers eligible to benefit from the domestic margin of preference, B, the requirements as to use of domestic content by eligible bidders for the favorable application of the domestic margin of preference, C, the percentage of the increase to be applied to the price criteria of the bidders ineligible to benefit from the application of the domestic margin of preference, and D, any other qualification or requirement the minister determined necessary. Now therefore be it resolved by this honorable House as follows. The resolution may be cited as the Public Procurement Domestic Margin of Preference Order 2019 resolution, and 2, the Public Procurement Domestic Margin of Preference Order 2019, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of September 2019, is affirmed.
Questions and answers to questions. Mr. Twigg.
Mr. Speaker, at the expiry of, 21 days, and notwithstanding the provision of Standing Order 17, I wish to ask the following questions. One to the Minister with responsibility for education, also to the Minister of Transport, to the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Mining.
Mr. Speaker, you will recall that earlier today I indicated to you that we were ready for the answers to the questions presented by the member. So if the member cares, we will submit those questions now. There's no point delaying the process if you're on your game and you're ready. So please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, this is extraordinary and a step in the right direction, that the answer is ready even before the question is tabled. And yes, and I'm very pleased, therefore, to respond to the invitation of the Minister and to ask if the Minister will please answer the questions tabled now in my name regarding the schools remaining on shift.
Thank you very much. Question 1. Will the Minister please state which are the primary and high schools remaining on shift? Answer. Kingston, Port Antonio, Brownstown, Montego Bay, Mandeville, Old Harbor, grand total of 37 remaining on shift. Question 2. Table. Will the Minister please state the dates when each of these will become single shift or extended day schools? Answer. The following depicts a draft of the phased approach. It can be done one time because it's extremely expensive. Phase 1, you have a copy? I don't need to go through the details. The schedule is before you. Enough to say that in phase 2, which is 2021 to 2023, 2021 to 2023, with one exception where we'll go to 24, the plan is all schools will be taken off shift. The capital budget, in respect to the capital budget, the question you asked about the capital budget, the amount, will the Minister able to, the projects, the cost of the process to eliminate the shift system, and please reconcile the expenditure with the triennial projects for capital expenditure in education contained in the 2019-2020 estimates of expenditure. The answer is that the capital budget is 1.2 billion and 644 million has been budgeted for infrastructure. The following schools are slated to be removed from shift in 2019-2020. Exchange All-Age School, 21.9 million. School, 30 million. Cedric Titus High School, 12 million. Port Antonio High, 30 million. Total to remove the shift, $93.9 million. I must, in the medium-term estimates, the 2019-2020 is $1.2 1,251,483 billion. 2021, $192,450,000. In 21-22, $115,103 million. And 22-23, $40,103. This is the program for the elimination of the shift system in Jamaica.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister for his answer. His final sentence reads, full removal of the shift, including new construction, is $12 billion required over the next 3 years. Mr. Speaker, could the Minister reconcile for me the fact that in the 2019-2020 Book of Estimates, indeed, the capital allocated is $1.25 billion, precipitously declining in the next 3 years to $192 million, $115 million, and then $40 million. Is the Minister saying that all of these sums will be utilized to relieve the shift, which is highly unlikely, having regard to the other calls on capital expenditure which such a large ministry has? And would he be able to say where the $12 billion that he himself refers to is coming from, having regard to these projections, and having regard also to the fact that the education budget, the recurrent budget, though not immediately applicable to this, is itself, when you look at the triennial expenditures projections, slated to be lower than anticipated inflation. So we're very pleased that there is this timetable, but how is it going to be afforded? That's the first question. The second one is this, that during the period when these schools are still on shift, waiting on their schedule, will the Minister say what special strengthening can be offered? Because we do know that the students on both shifts in these instances are receiving less than a full day's teaching and learning. I'd like to suggest to the Minister that he should consider strengthening the opportunities for teaching and learning, particularly for those schools. In his presentation before the parliamentary vacation, he mentioned that in September, that's this month, some 100 math coaches and 20 literacy coaches would be employed. And I would like to ask him if those can be concentrated on the schools which are already at a disadvantage and where there would be the greatest need.
I wonder if, I'm sorry, I got distracted a while ago. Could the last part of what you asked here?
Mr. Speaker, the Minister told us in his previous address, just before we broke for the summer, that there would be 100 math coaches and 20 literacy coaches who would be deployed in the school, additional to the establishment for this going forward, this September onwards. And I am asking him, and indeed suggesting to him, that having regard to the prejudice that is embedded in the SHIP system, if those teachers could pay special attention to those students in those schools while they are awaiting the relief of the SHIP system according to the schedule that is offered.
You are correct. Emphasis is being placed on trying to introduce the coaching system in a more intensive way so that we can elevate the level of performance in those schools that are now under the shift system, especially who are now experiencing great challenges. You know, remember, just by way of information, I did an analysis of 6 schools, 3 schools from inner city communities that are economically challenged, and 3 schools that are considered high-performing schools, high schools. I chose 3 constituencies that enjoy enormous support from their sitting members of parliament. The other 3 that are high-performing, I gave no regard to their level of representation in the House and their strength of representation. One happened to, well, anyway. Now, the comparison was to determine an area within the PEP that we now share in terms of information, the ability test, which tells you of the child's capacity to understand what they read. That is one of the key and fundamental criteria for assessing a child's likelihood of success at school. In the 3 communities that are economically challenged, those 3 communities, the abilities in the higher end, I chose, I don't know, I hesitate to name the schools, but you can imagine who they are. They were in the range of 95 to 100% assessment out of 100. It's a percentage assessment, the abilities test. 95% average. In the 3 schools that are located in communities that are economically challenged, 2 schools had 15, one had 15 and the other had 16%. And the other school, whose constituency is represented in this honorable house by a member who is now sitting here as we speak, was 22%. 22% assessment in the abilities category. Now, when a child gets a 22% assessment or a 15% or a 16% in the abilities category, in fact, 2 members are in this house of the low category. When you send that child into a high school structure, from the primary school into the high school, immediately we have to put in an intensive program of coaching. If that child is to have any chance at all of coming out at the other end with an education. Because already they are starting from the primary school into the secondary school in such a challenged position that is nigh impossible for any set of teachers to bring about the results that we all are hoping for. So the only way that we can bring this about is to increase the number of coaches, increase the attention paid to those students who are specifically identified, and in the schedule that I prepared, I specifically identified those that are most challenged. But I would never publish it and give anybody their names, and I'm reluctant to deal with the schools involved, other than to say 2 of the members from whom I chose because of the strength of their representation are experiencing the greatest challenge. So I want to advise the members of parliament with that kind of school to get integrally involved in the development of the schools in their constituency, and to have a hands-on approach to trying to assist in every way possible, because there is no better focus that can be placed on any activity in the constituency that supersedes that of paying attention to the children who are challenged. And if you want the information privately, I will communicate with you, as long as it is maintained on a confidential basis. I will sit with you and I will reveal the information to you. And in fact, member, I will pass that information on to you as the opposition spokesman.
Mr. Speaker, thank the Minister. the schools of the type that he speaks that are disadvantaged tend also to be the ones on shift. And that is why I'm emphasizing that the devolution of coaches needs or could do with the special allocation to them, which I'm sure the minister will take into account. Those are the schools that get those with the children with the lowest PEP scores, and particularly the lowest ability test scores. Mr. Speaker, the minister is correct that when those children ascend to grade 7, a great deal has to be done with them to avert what the leader of the opposition has called the apartheid in education. But, Mr. Speaker, this honourable House needs to recognize that the problem starts much earlier, and I am pleading for the time in this House in an entirely consensual way for us to discuss what needs to be done in order to ensure that our early childhood and primary system does not continue to throw out something close to 50% of our students with the incapacity to deal with the expensive and valuable, indispensable high school system. That is what is before us. And Mr. Speaker, the minister hasn't yet answered my question about where the $12 billion is coming from, having regard to the projections. But I'm rising, and I believe I'm sure I speak for the members of this House and certainly for this side, to strengthen the minister's hand in respect of the budget negotiations coming up, because education has been poorly treated in the last budget and in the projections going forward. And there is no economic development, there is no surcease of crime and violence that is going to take place unless more resources, human resources, financial resources, and a different frame of mind is offered or is available for our education system. I am certain of the minister's conviction in this regard, but it needs a national endeavor that transcends the divide in this House. May it please you.
Mr. Speaker, I couldn't agree with the member more. And the fact of the matter is, when I took to a cabinet a proposal in a different area, as important, arguably very important, not quite as important, but very important, it was the Prime Minister himself who said, your priority must be to get the students away from the shift system. His own priority. Now, with that kind of assurance, member, you will appreciate how comforted I am going into the negotiations for a higher budget. Because I realize, and that is why we specifically spelled it out here, because sometimes people take these things for granted. But we must know what the cost is, and we must know that if we don't spend money on building a cohort that can absorb education, we are going nowhere as a country. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm going to be bold. I want to recommend to the minister that he persuades his colleagues, and the Minister of Finance is here. We need $15 billion in the first supplementary estimate to shore up the present education system, or we will not be able to overcome some of the palpable deficiencies that the primary exit profile and the results of the CSEC and CAPE results examinations have showed us. And at another stage, having regard to the resolutions and questions that I have placed on the order paper this evening, I would like to spell out where I think those additional resources could be most fruitfully used. We do not have time to waste or to wait even until next year. Please you.
Mr. Speaker, it has just been brought to my attention that we need to ask for a recommittal of the item announcements in order to have documents laid on the table of the House.
Those in favor? The minister is asking for a recommittal of the item. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Announcements.
Also laid on the table of the House today is the Constitution of Jamaica proclamation by His Excellency the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Linton Allen, Member of the Order of the Nation, Knight Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, Commander of the Order of Distinction, Knight of Grace of the Most Venerable Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, Governor General of Jamaica. And the Emergency Powers Act.
Motion relating to sitting of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
There are no.
The motion is that the House be adjourned until next week, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? As this honorable House now stands adjourned.
Searching online is what most of us do every day. Information is the world's new currency, and the provision of quality information is what is setting businesses, governments, and even